Hello, my name is Austin Belzer, and welcome back to the Austin B Media Podcast. In this episode, I'll be sitting down with something a bit different. I don't normally talk about video games, but I'm going to be talking about video games, specifically Star Wars Jedi Survivor, the sequel to Jedi Fallen Order, with Matt Hudson. We're going to be talking about the game's mechanics, story, character arcs, and what makes it worthy of discussion a year after release. You can play Star Wars Jedi Survivor on PlayStation 4 and 5, Xbox Series S and X, Xbox One, and PC. I don't think I missed a platform on that, but feel free to correct me on that. But Matt, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me on, Austin. I'm excited to be talking about this game. I'm looking forward to talking about someone who I know loves films so much, but now we're going to be talking about video games. So let's see how that goes.
It is something had to entirely rework my show notes that I normally make. So yeah, it's going to be a bit more in depth. So for listeners or watchers at home, if you're not ready for a 2 hour, 3 hour podcast, set aside a block of time. But Matt, since I haven't had you on before, I would love to let people know about what I watched tonight, your outlet, and what you've been working on recently.
Well, the outlet began in 2016 because, like a lot of people, I just didn't have anyone within my circles to talk film about, getting into it, having fun talking about film, but more so than did you like the film? I didn't have anyone to sit down and chat with, so I thought I'd create a site where I could review films and provide my own opinions and hopefully find like-minded people who would firstly read them, but secondly also just to converse with. And I have been very lucky to have found a lot of great people along the way since starting the site over 8 years ago now, which is wild to comprehend for me. In 2018, I became a Rotten Tomatoes approved critic, and I still am now, which
Yes.
I'm very, very pleased about. It's not something I take lightly, considering all of the discourse that surrounds that red tomato or that green splat. I host a couple of great film podcasts, which allow me to enjoy what I love doing, which is talking about films. Weekly talking about the new releases in films, or I could be talking about Star Wars, which is pretty good for today's discussion, or
Yeah.
horror films. I cover a few gamuts there.
Over to your left, you've got a Force Awakens poster.
I tell you something right now, right next to me, just happen to have these. I have the Cal Kestis lightsaber, and I have the Seer Junda lightsaber as well.
Shot.
Yeah,
Okay,
man. They
wow.
they usually sit on my shelf over there alongside the Art of Jedi Survivor, the Art of Fallen Order. I have a custom 3D printed Mantis, which my dad, who does models, he painted beautifully for me. I have a Grease Dritus trading card, which the actor sent me. I've got vintage collection figures up there of the Fallen Order and Survivor gang. I'm obsessed, Austin.
Yeah, I was listening to that and I was thinking, dang, I thought I was a Star Wars fan. Apparently not. But I think the most extreme I got was I specifically bought the Star Wars Force Awakens Blu-ray twice because for those listening at this moment, the Blu-ray for Force Awakens came out twice. It came out first in Blu-ray, and then a few months later, they released a special 3D Blu-ray where it had this really cool, I guess it was a lenticular color cover of just like Rey's hand and the blue lightsaber, Anakin's lightsaber. You could move it and it would look like it was in motion. I bought that Target Blu-ray, which was just cardboard. It was made out of cardboard. And I was just like, this is ridiculous. And I ended up selling it months later. Um, I think I traded it in somewhere because I was like, I can't look at this on my shelf. This is awful looking. I loved it because it had all the faces of the cast inside, but I thought it was going to be made out of higher quality, but apparently not.
Star Wars collecting isn't cheap, and
It is
I
not.
can say I'm not a collector. I only collect things like these lightsabers because I can, if I'm going to display them, I want things that if somebody's going to come around, they can look at them and be like, oh, that's cool. Everyone's going to say, can I hold the lightsaber? Whereas if I
Yeah.
have lots of figures out, it becomes a nightmare to clean. It can look a bit messy, and I don't want to explain all of them to everyone. I'm happy to just explain why I have this lightsaber and be done with it.
When Force Awakens came out, I bought all the Wave 1 action figures for that. I lined my work desk with them. The TIE fighters, Kylo Ren, the stormtroopers. I think there are a few other things. I know there's an X-Wing in there or something like that. I don't know if Gwendolyn Christie's character was in there, Captain
Phasma,
Phasma.
yeah. Simpler, weren't they?
Yeah, but I bought all those and I don't even want to think about what that bill was. I think it was the price of a PS4, PS5 Pro. Um,
Oh, let's not get into that as well.
well,
Ooh,
let's not get into that. But
no.
we could record a 2 hour podcast just on that.
It's crazy. PS5 and Xbox Series X were current gen. I kind of feel like the PS Pro, PS5 Pro, the PS6, I imagine will be out within or by the end of this decade. So why do we need another console in between, other than money? The ability to upscale should be available for what we have now, or wait until we release the PS6 or whatever. Use that for the next gen. I'm not the most versed on technical stuff, but I looked at that and thought it's cynical. I won't be purchasing it. I'm happy with my PS5 as it is.
Yeah. I got mine, the Spider-Man 2 bundle, I think last December or something like that. I'm good. I don't
Yeah.
45% better graphics. If I can't tell a difference in a YouTube compression video, I'm not going to be able to tell a difference on my 1080p TV.
Yeah, that's it. I don't know
Um,
how many games will be affected by it. If I'm going to play PS4 games, I don't know. This might be my naivety, but I don't know how much better they're going to look on a PS5 Pro if I'm playing older games. I don't know how many games it really affects other than the AAA new releases, of which I don't really play any anyway.
yeah, how much better is Batman Return to Arkham? I was just playing that last night. But before we get into the main meat of the podcast, I usually ask, what do you want to recommend? In fact, I will customize this recommendation since we're talking about
Yeah.
Star Wars. What Star Wars thing would you recommend?
It's hard to look past Andor, and I know a lot of people may roll their eyes at that because, especially people who listen to me talk Star Wars, I love Andor, but it doesn't always feel like Star Wars.
Hmm.
To me, though, that is to its benefit. There's enough Star Wars in us in there, but if you just want a good character study or a good ensemble cast who are thrown into different arcs and have to find their way out of it, all leading towards what we know Andor and his conclusion lead to, then it's hard to look past that, if you ask me. Other than that, what we're going to speak about tonight is also something I would happily recommend. I also understand that video games aren't the easiest to just pick up and get into.
Yeah.
However, on YouTube, you can watch game movies. If you've got 3.5, 4 hours, or maybe longer, sit down and watch the Survivor and Fallen Order game movies. That would be the first one I go for. Mando season one because it's beautiful. I'm trying to think outside the box rather than just saying go and watch Empire Strikes Back or something like that. But go watch Rogue One.
Yeah, that was going to be my film recommendation because Rogue One was the first Star Wars movie that I saw multiple times in theaters. I saw maybe Force Awakens twice in theaters. I
Mm.
think I saw Rogue One 3 or 4, or maybe even 5 times for the same reasons Andor didn't feel like a Star Wars TV show. It felt like something new. It felt like a guerrilla war movie. But if I'm gonna go with a game, I'm gonna be the populist choice. I'm gonna go Star Wars Rebel Assault.
Ooh, okay. Why is that? Why that one?
Well, I've got a little bias because it was one of the first Star Wars games I played. Um, but I think it's the only Star Wars game or anything Star Wars that really nailed the feeling of being in the movies. Um, I would play that trench run level so many times. I probably played that more times than the actual campaign itself because it was just so fun to run through that trench and you felt like, okay, what ways can I min max like going in and out of the trench? Um, And yeah, it just felt like you were part of the story rather than recreating it. Um,
Hmm.
which I think is a problem I have with Star Wars Squadrons. Other than the fact that its controls make me feel very, very nauseous when I play it. Um, like I no control scheme worked for me. I played 5 minutes of that game and said, "Nope, this game is not for me."
I get that.
I'll be the first person to say I actually liked Battlefront 2015, but we'll talk about those later. My recommendation for this week for Star Wars is going to be Rebel Assault. I know it's probably expensive. It's probably at least $50 at your retro game store. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. With the The classics that they've been doing on PS Plus, it might come to PS Plus one day
Yep.
because I know what was the one that just came out? Star Wars Clone Wars. That just came out on PS Plus. And
They
not
had
the
the pod
cartoon.
racing game as well, didn't it?
Yeah, episode one and Pod Racer. A lot of Star Wars games are coming out for PS Plus. A lot of PS2 games. Anyways, I'm thinking that'll eventually be there. So you can either wait or buy it for 50 bucks. I played it on GameCube. That's the best way to play it for me. But if they can remaster it on PS5 or do the PS2 classics thing and make the haptic triggers enabled, oh man, just instant day one, I'll delete everything off my console to make space.
That's love, that is.
I've got Red Dead Redemption 2 on there.
I haven't played that game yet. I know it's heresy, but I have it being delivered because I rent my games.
Hmm.
There's a service in the UK where you pay £10 a month and I can rent two games at a time and keep them for as long as I want. One of the ones I've got coming this week is Red Dead 2 because so many people have said you have to play. It's one of the greatest games ever. That's how I play a lot of my games. I try not to spend full price on them. I just try to rent them because I don't often replay games unless I have a connection to them. I'm happy to just rent. So Red Dead's on its way.
I hope you enjoy it. I haven't played very much. I'm probably like a few hours in, like 10, 15, as much as you can get into an open world game before it really just says, do what you want. And then you're like, oh, I really can do what I want. Let me do this, this, this. I kind of tend to get lost on that aspect.
Mhm.
A game rental service is how I played Split Second. I would do anything for a sequel to that game. I One of the best racing games I've ever played. Need for Speed Unbound came close, but it focused too much on drifting. So that's my recommendation. Pick it up if you can, or PlayStation if you're somehow listening. Please do it for your 30-year anniversary, maybe. I know you're doing that my first GT thing that I'm probably going to play because I've never played a Gran Turismo game. You've been having a really bad PS Plus lineup, so add that. Add Rebel Assault. Get the Disney lawyers on the phone.
I second that.
Since we're already talking about Star Wars games, um, let's move right into this discussion about Jedi Survivor. So first things first, what's been your experience with Star Wars games? Like, what's your favorite?
But I've enjoyed many over the years, like going back to N64 from Rogue Squadron and X-Wing versus TIE Fighter, all the way up until the more recent games. You mentioned the Battlefront games,
Hmm.
and of course Star Wars Outlaws, which dropped only a few weeks ago from
Yeah,
Ubisoft and Massive Entertainment. I've been playing that and enjoy it for the most part. I think I've been spoiled by other games though, but I'm not as keen on things such as The Force Unleashed. I know a lot of people love that game, but controversially for me, I think The Force Unleashed and certain aspects of the EU, the expanded universe, which Disney have now done away with, I think that skewed people's perspective of what they think Star Wars should be, kind of power fantasies and things like that. I can appreciate the first game was a lot of fun. The second one wasn't for me, but I still dive into Battlefront 2 an awful lot because it's easy to do so. I can spend half an hour on Battlefront 2 if I want. Just jump on the online mode, which is still pretty well populated, and
really.
enjoy it. It's there is still a lot of backing for that game, and I know so many people are clamoring for Battlefront 3, which I would love to see. I'm not banging the door down quite as much yet. I've got enough Star Wars games to keep me going. I finished Outlaws. I finished that story. Took me about 17 hours to finish it with the Golden Path, just sticking to the main story. But I haven't been compelled to dive in too much to the exploration side of it. As a Star Wars fan, so much of the exploration is insane. Like it's so cool. You mentioned being able to doing the trench run and feeling like you're in the moment. It's very easy to explore Tatooine and other planets in Outlaws and actually just get lost. Just feel like you're there. You're not doing a mission for Luke Skywalker or something like that. It's totally disconnected in that sense. And you do feel like you're just exploring, and there's so many Easter eggs, but it hasn't drawn me in. It's missing a spark for me. Any game or film or TV series or any book, whatever, has to have a hook, a spark to connect you to the story. And Outlaws it didn't have enough of that to keep me involved as I wanted to be.
Yeah, it felt like, and this is probably why I didn't pick it up. It felt like Ubisoft started at, let's make a Lando game. And then they said, well, okay, but what if we made something original instead?
Hmm.
And now Lando's going to be a DLC that they do. I'll be interested to see how that's integrated because it just felt like a Lando game to me. And then they inserted KVS into the story and it feels devoid of,
Yeah,
um,
Kay's a cool character. I'll give her that. Kay is very cool, very likable. This is all known information, but she
hmm,
doesn't know what she's doing. She's not really a smuggler. She does odd jobs around
interesting.
the city, and you grow with the character and make all the mistakes. But I understand what you mean. There are people saying that this is just a Han Solo or Orlando archetype character. So why isn't it that you know, it would it be fun to play as Han and Lando? Yes. But I do like having a new character to play with, but then of course it depends on whether or not that character is interesting, and it depends how they integrate the character into the story. But I can't disagree with what you're saying about maybe their initial planning and what they maybe where they wanted to go.
But yeah, because there have been new characters that have really worked in the EA era. Iden Versio comes to mind. I really liked Battlefront 2 in that aspect. It felt like the first time, and that's in Battlefront 2 for people who don't know. Battlefront 2, yes, it does have a story mode. It's a very good story mode, in my opinion. The
Yeah,
gameplay is not there, but because
the
it ends up
story is great.
but the story's great. Like there's a scene where which is basically feels ripped out of Halo Reach. I won't spoil it for people who haven't played the game, but it's really late in the game. It's the turning point mission, and it just really sold me on the game. Well, I guess it's the midpoint, but you know what I mean. But you've played it.
I know exactly which one you mean, and I shall keep stum.
But yeah, I feel like EA has done great characters before. It just seems like Ubisoft can't seem to crack it for whatever reason.
And it's their first go as well. Let's see if they get another crack.
Yeah, and I think, oh no, that's Quantic Dream. That's the other one that's coming up.
Oh, Eclipse, yeah.
Yeah,
We assume it's coming out. I don't know
yeah,
when.
yeah, and I think there's one from Amy Henning, or
There
did that
was
get
an Amy
canceled?
Hennig game that got cancelled. I think the only ones in development at the minute are the Star Wars Jedi 3. The Star Wars Eclipse is still with Quantic Dream. I'm sure there was a strategy-based game they announced, and I thought there was another first-person shooter game being developed.
Star
Again, I'd
Wars
have to.
Hunters. That was from
I think there's
Zynga.
another one alongside that
Oh,
because there was Aspire were doing the Knights of the Old Republic remake, which who knows what's happening with that anymore. So classic Lucasfilm at the minute where things get announced, but until I'm actually holding it in my hand or watching it on the cinema, I'm never too sure whether they're actually going to uh, materialize.
yeah. But that said, as far as my history when it comes to Star Wars games, it's very thin. I was very selective when it came to my Star Wars games. I didn't play the Jedi Knight or Jedi Academy games. I mainly stuck to Rebel Assault, Rogue Squadron, Force Unleashed. You mentioned that earlier. Lego Star Wars, just the first one. I played a little bit of Skywalker Saga, but I didn't play any of the movie games that came out. But yeah, Force Unleashed and all the Battlefront games I've played. And really, the only one out of those I've really liked is the one I mentioned earlier, which was Rogue Squadron, because it just feels like you're part of the story instead of recreating the story. But I would do anything for actual, like, movie adaptation, game adaptation, sorry, of the Skywalker saga that isn't Lego. That would be amazing for me because I feel like an open world Force Awakens would be just amazing. Or even just that for Rise of Skywalker. I know it's not the greatest movie, but that would make a great game. As far as how it's being treated now, I think the only ones I've really liked are the Jedi games. Yeah, I picked up Fallen Order when it came to EA Play about a year or so ago, in the run-up to Jedi Survivor, actually. And is what convinced me to pre-order Jedi Survivor, the digital deluxe edition. Because at that time, I was like, oh, maybe there's a season pass. Well,
Huh.
no, there was not. But yeah, I've majorly liked the Rogue Squadron, the Battlefront games. And Force Unleashed, although Force Unleashed 2 really didn't work for me because it felt so much like a rehash of 1. And in defense of Force Unleashed, I think it works a lot better if you play it on the Wii, not on a console. Because on the Wii, it was all motion control. So your Wiimote was your lightsaber. So you swung it around and then used the nunchuck to move around.
Mhm.
So for the longest time until a few years ago, I didn't play it on console. They're wildly different experiences. I think Force Unleashed on the Wii, the first one, is the way to go. But Force Unleashed 2, I played that on console and oof, that was
Yeah,
rough. But
yeah,
Fallen Order, we'll get into that a little bit here soon, but it's a good game. But we'll get into my misgivings about that game here pretty shortly. So yeah, let's get to Fallen Order. What did you think of Fallen Order, and how do you think Survivor compares?
a big surprise to me. In short, I love that game. I really do. But it came as a surprise. When it came out in November 2019, we were about to get The Mandalorian. And of course, nobody really knew what that was going to be like because it was a first Disney Plus show. Would it be good? Would it be bad? We were coming up to the rise of Skywalker as well. So the conclusion of the saga. So there was lots of like, new things beginning, big things ending. The hype was massive for seemingly everything but Fallen Order. There was a lot of excitement for Fallen Order, but Rise of Skywalker, Mandalorian, people were very excited and anxious about these. Whereas for me, Fallen Order kind of slid in between them and comfortably was the best story out of all of them for me because it hit all of the hallmarks and the DNA of Star Wars, but it hit the feelings of the themes of hope, love, family, tragedy, and overcoming adversity. They're all there in Fallen Order, but they're packaged in an interesting story, post Order 66, with a Jedi survivor. You get a new cast of characters who, for me, work so well together. This disparate band of, well, I can't call them no-gooders, but they say you've got a Jedi, an ex-Jedi, essentially a smuggler, a Night Sister. Somehow they all work together. But it is the fact that they were so intent on making sure that Cal Kestis was the star of the show. He was the focal point. What he felt, we felt. When he suffered, we suffered. When he rebuilt his lightsaber and we exit that cave on Ilum with a lightsaber, we feel like a Jedi. We then it's the moments of triumph in that game. For me, it's a perfect confluence of so many things. Is it a perfect game? No, it's not a perfect game. There are issues I have with it from a more mechanical standpoint or in some cases visual when it comes to things like the map or traversal. But in terms of the story and the characters,
Yeah,
I think it's
definitely.
fantastic.
Never have I wanted to punt a fake droid more than when I look at that map in Fallen Order.
Yes, there are things to mention as we go along, like about how it actually stacks up in terms of what does it do better. But that that's or immediately like the traversal is in Fallen Order going back is not great. But in terms of how Survivor compares to that game, by continuing the story organically, it feels like a successor, notwithstanding its 5 year time jump. So it
Yeah.
continues and builds upon those themes, the characters and the gameplay of Fallen Order. Both have exceptionally strong stories that continue to reside within the Star Wars, like I mentioned about the DNA, but they feel so distinct. So it compares to the game by it doesn't reinvent the wheel of what Fallen Order gave us. It just says, well, you're this big. We're going to go this big now. We're going to go exponentially bigger in a lot of aspects. But that was my biggest fear and my biggest worry about going in is how will it compare? Because I really liked Fallen Order. And there were certain things I didn't want Survivor to do. And I feel like they didn't do that. They didn't go down the dark side and change things too much. They only added to that game.
I'll echo that. Although I was a lot lower on Fallen Order than I thought I was when I played it. I forget how many years ago now. I feel like it was pretty recent. I feel like I played it during the pandemic, like in 2021 or something like that. Because I, I was going through EA Play. I had just gotten Xbox Game Pass, and with the Ultimate version, you get EA Play. So I was like, let me check out all these Star Wars games, Squadrons, Battlefront 2, Jedi Fallen Order. And the the one out of all those three that stuck out to me was Fallen Order, but not in the way I thought. Because Fallen Order, for, I know I already talked about the map, but that map is left led me to go around in circles, especially I don't think I can spoil a 5 or 6 year old game now, especially when you go to Dathomir.
Zepho.
Zepho is another one where I probably spent 3 hours just like, okay, what is that last little bit of the puzzle I need to do? Because it gives you stats on how much you've explored. There was one where I was 91% explored. I'm like, okay, what is the last 9%? I went around for hours trying to figure it out. Besides the map, I really like the combat of Fallen Order. I think that shouldn't be a surprise. Stig from the God of War series is part of this. While I didn't like the two God of War games I had played, I think it really works here. For those who want to know which God of War games I've played, it's God of War 3 and God of War 2018. I still haven't played a Ragnarok yet. I'm waiting for that to eventually show up on PS Plus. If Sony decides to put that on however many years after
Yeah.
release. I, but yeah, I love the combat. I loved the exploration. I think it felt really natural, but also really contained. Kind of like it reminded me a lot of the exploration of Force Unleashed, actually, where it wouldn't
Yeah.
necessarily
Yeah.
channel you down a hallway, but it would say, okay, what's that over there? What's that over there? In a similar vein to Breath of the Wild, um, where it's just like, hey, what's that over there? Let me go fight Ogdo Bogdo. I did not know what I was in for with that fight.
That was genius. Putting that dude right at the beginning of the game on Bogano, where if you just fall down the hole, you think, oh, this lizard's not going to be too much. Without any of your skills or abilities, it is a real wake up call. And I love that they just did that straight up the back. You can traverse it by not falling down the hole, but if you do, then yeah, good luck.
Yeah, and it was this moment of like, okay, why is there a hole here? And
Yep.
I'm like, okay, let me see if I can go around it. Nope. Okay, I'm fighting a frog with the health bar about this big.
Yeah.
Despite that, the combat was amazing. Like, I can't remember. Could you throw lightsabers in Fallen Order?
I'm trying. I think it might have been on the skill tree where once you level up, eventually you could throw it in a straight line and back again. You couldn't do anything particularly crazy with it.
Yeah, and Jedi Survivor, that's one where it gets really crazy with that stuff.
Yeah.
I really liked it, but I think there was a lot of room for improvement. Going into Survivor, I was really hoping to just build on that, like just say, okay, let's fix the things that really didn't work from Fallen Order. And I was hoping it would keep that sense that I am building my Jedi up. And I think it succeeds at that. I just expected it to expand, and it did that and more. The story I have some misgivings about, but we'll talk about that a little bit in spoilers. But yeah, I just expected it to do more, like the dismemberment of stormtroopers. That was a really weird thing where I'm like, okay, I'm late in the game and I'm on this planet that I can't spoil the Fallen Order, but late in the game you visit a planet that is very heavily hinted at being Star Killer base.
Yeah.
I can't chop off the people's arms. I know that was a Disney thing. That was
It
one
was.
thing on my wish list. I was like, fix the traversal because there were some times where the timing of the jumping, like the double jump especially, really didn't work. There's this puzzle on Bogano where you basically have to do a 180 turn from where you entered. I spent hours trying to figure that out. And
Yeah.
but it was just as simple as I mistimed the button presses. It
Yeah.
it didn't give me enough grace in the button window to make that jump. So, but yeah, I think I just wanted it to be expanded upon. I really wanted it to go maybe even deeper into that Order 66 lore, but given the stuff that it released in that time since, I was like, okay, I'm good if you don't. Uh, I really didn't have a lot of expectations, just fix what was broken and do more better, to
Yeah,
put it bluntly.
that's fair enough.
Let's talk about Survivor a little bit. What were your first impressions of it when you booted it up for the first time? What did you think?
I was trepidatious going into it more than anything because I wanted Respawn and EA to succeed because I really liked Fallen Order. I expected it to go bigger, as sequels tend to. So booting it up, I thought, oh no, it's a point of no return now. If this doesn't land, then well, let's just get it over and done with. But immediately upon booting up, we get the recap of Fallen Order in that really well done 2 minute story animation. And I felt like I was back home almost, back with my friends, back with the gang. I really enjoyed that as a way of getting people up to speed, or if you haven't played Fallen Order, this is where we're at currently. So
It
I wasn't
was,
going in with anything like that. But I was very, very pleased when I booted it up. Just from like the UI, the look of it, like the quality of the music and all the soundtrack is great. It goes up tenfold in this game. The opening cinematics and where we find Cal and the planet that we're on, the look of it, the level of detail. I knew that Respawn were going to deliver something. Now, of course, the story could have ended up being terrible, and but those initial impressions, I was very impressed. It felt like putting on a comfortable pair of clothes again. Now let's see how good they look when I go outside in them. I was very pleased with it kicking off.
I'll echo that sentiment. I really loved it. That opening sequence, I won't spoil, but I think it was the first time where I looked at it and said, is this what current gen feels like? And I played it on Series S. It just blew me away. EA, if you're listening, please send me a PS5 copy. But yeah, it really sold me on like, oh, this is what current gen is about. This is like you can zip around easier, I think. Yeah, I don't want to spoil the opening level, so that's where I'll leave it at. It just really founded, okay, this is what a $70 game should be like. I was really blown away with it.
Yeah. And you mentioned a price point. These games aren't cheap and they're not accessible for everybody. I wouldn't be able to play any really because I haven't got $80 to drop on a game without even knowing if I'm going to enjoy it. Unless it's one like this or if it's Star Wars, I'll get it because I'm a sucker for it. But it is expensive, and it's a good point you mentioned that booting it up and seeing the level design of that intro and how it all looks. It is encouraging to think this is a step up in every way, and they have utilized current gen technology. It feels like an upgrade already. So, what else can they deliver going forward? That's the exciting thing I felt about the game. If this part looks so good, what else is to come?
Yeah. It was the first game I pre-ordered this generation. I really hope this is good because I put down the money. I mean, parents put down the money, but same
Still money.
difference. But yeah, that's how sold I was from Fallen Order. I even picked up the digital deluxe edition. I wanted the Han Solo stuff. I'm part of the problem. I know. I just thought Cal looks so cool in it. It blew me away. But jumping off of that, let's talk about what's new in Survivor. What were your impressions of the traversal system? At least if it isn't new, it feels new. You've got the new lightsaber stance system where you can
Hmm.
switch between, like, is it a spoiler if we talk about the stances? Like
It
what
was
stances?
definitely in the pre-release marketing. It's well known prior to the game. EA did a very good job of utilizing probably IGN to get little nuggets of information out. So yeah, the stances aren't a spoiler.
Yeah. So yeah, you've got single blade, then double blade, then you've got the blaster and single blade, and then you've got the cross guard, which people went nuts over with the analyzing, like, why does Cal have a cross guard now? Is he Kylo
Yeah.
Ren? Okay, come on, guys. That's when I knew Star Wars theories got off the rail. That's when I knew. But yeah, you've got the new stances, improved traversal. You can now customize Cal even more.
Oh.
Instead of just ponchos, you've got like actual jackets. You've got, I forget if you have like headbands or something like that. I don't think you do have
Uh,
headbands, but you have jeans. You can customize your holster if you're using the blaster stance. And, and of course, it's open world now. So yeah, like what are your thoughts on everything that's new?
necessary. but it was a necessary part of the next step. Like you said, there are things in Fallen Order which, looking back now, potentially feel restrictive,
Mhm.
but actually Survivor's taken that and turned it into a mechanic like the traversal, like the ability to fast travel. It is so welcome. When I played Fallen Order, I heard people saying, "Oh, where's fast travel? Why can't I do that?" And I thought, why do people want to do that? Let's explore these planets. The amount of times I got stuck trying to get back to the Mantis,
Hmm.
and then now playing Survivor, I totally understand why people wanted fast travel. So I apologize to anyone who I naysayed about that. The map is still the map, but I do feel like it's slightly easier to navigate this time around. I think are excellent because don't forget there was a dual wield stance, and some scenarios almost demand that you change your stance up. If everyone has their favorite, but sometimes you're almost required to change it up. It wasn't mandatory, but you being such as you had to do it. You could just Leroy Jenkins in otherwise and just use your favorite stance. But they did kind of nudge you into saying, well, you can use your double blade here, or maybe you want to use the cross guard in this instance. But I love that the game didn't strong arm you into doing that. It didn't make you do it. I like
Mhm.
that. Being hamstrung to only having two stances, I'm not really overly concerned about that. I know lots of people wish that they could change up on the fly, but to that I look at and think, well, that seems like a natural progression for the next game where you can just pick and choose as you want. But I think the new additions to the game were necessary, but they did just feel like a natural extension of what we got in Fallen Order. Similarly to new story beats, new planets, new characters, and everything new felt like it fit, and everything felt like there was there for a reason. But in terms of the gameplay and the mechanics, yeah, everything they introduced necessary. Can you imagine not being able to traverse Kobo if you didn't have certain additional ways of doing it, if you didn't learn new
Yeah.
skills in which you can get across the planet quicker, it would be hellacious. So, yeah, I was very, very pleased with it, and I don't have any issues with any of the new things in the game. There are things that I wish you could do, which I can mention later on in the episode when we get to more spoilery stuff, but nothing that broke the game for me, nothing that broke my immersion. So, yeah, I really like the new additions to the gameplay.
I'll just echo that and say the only thing I really didn't like, which you already mentioned, is the stance system. I
Mhm.
really felt like there were times where I looked at Cal and I'm like, you've got the blaster right there. Just let me use the blaster.
I get it.
And I would have been okay if they'd blocked that to a skill you had to learn or like a cooldown or something like that. Because you'll remember in Fallen Order when you bring the dual wield into I forget what the stance is called, but where you bring the two lightsabers together. But in Fallen Order, you could bring the dual wield and then bring them together to
Yeah.
form one lightsaber with two ends. Um, and that had a cooldown. I would have been okay with something like that. But I also do agree that maybe that's something that, for story's sake, it made more sense to be like, well, okay, would Cal realistically do this in this
Hmm.
situation? And I think it it reinforced strategy into the combat where
Yeah.
I feel like in Fallen Order, one of the many things that I didn't like about it is you could just button mash
Yeah.
in that game. You could be like, okay, I'm just gonna slice this dude up. Perfect time dodge, slice, slice. Perfect time dodge, slice, slice. But in this game, it's like, okay, if I pick the cross guard, my timing might be off on a swing. Or if I throw my dual wield sabers,
Hmm.
I might leave myself open to attack. And then you're really in trouble, especially later on. But yeah, I understand it. I do think everything really is improved, especially the exploration. The planets felt stacked, unlike they did in Fallen Order. Fallen Order felt like level one, level two, level three. But here it's
Hmm.
like you're just going deeper into the planet's surface instead of just levels, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because especially with there's a elevator you take in Fallen Order that goes from the surface all the way down to like I would assume would be the planet's core or very close to it. And it's like you're just sitting there in the elevator for about 2 minutes, just twirling your thumbs, like, okay, let's
Whilst the game's loading around you. Yes.
But here, I don't know if this is a spoiler, so stop me if it is. But you get these mounts where you can jump onto like I forget what they're called, but they're like big birds.
That was in the trailer.
They're big birds where you can just jump onto and then go from a high position down to a low position. There's uh, a boss fight where you need to do that. As soon as you land, you instantly go into a boss fight.
But you
Um,
can see it though, whereas with the elevator, like you mentioned in Fallen Order, you are just kind of waiting for the game to load around you. In these instances, when you're traversing on any specific animals, whatever, you can see your destinations, so it doesn't feel like a cop out, like a loading screen, for
yeah,
example. If you do it wrong, well, you better do it again because you're not going to get to where you need to go.
there's this one puzzle where it relies on a bird and you have to go through updrafts. I forget their actual,
Name.
but they're basically a mix of a dragon and a bird. This is where we already talked about exploration. What did you think of the more ex open world exploration?
I liked it. I liked the mix of exploration and platforming this time around because at times, certainly on specific planets, you can explore as much as you want and it's fairly simple to traverse. Other times in the game, they go really platform heavy
Mhm.
and it takes over. Certain elements of the ludo narrative dissonance come to the fore where you're kind of like, well, why is that there? And it's a bit convenient that that specific thing is there for me
Yeah,
to hook onto, but it's a game I can get past that quite quickly. I will say Outlaws does that better though. Your traversal and platforming, it feels a bit more organic to your environment. But yeah, no, I really like the exploration because, like you said, they feel stacked. Certain areas and planets feel big, they feel diverse. It isn't just, in some instances anyway, it's not just here is like sand planet. There is, well, here's planet, but you can do this, this, and this, and each part feels different. I really like that. And you can just do the main story. You can just go ahead and do the beats, or you can follow side quests or follow rumors and get a more rich experience out of the game. That's where it differs from Fallen Order, which Fallen Order was linear. It was a
mhm.
story, go and do it, like you mentioned. Whereas Survivor, it is here's a story, go and do it, but it's also you could do that, but what does that guy over there say? What does this person say? What can I get? And you get things out of it which aren't just cosmetics. So it's a bigger game in that sense. It does reward exploration, and the exploration is fun as
Mhm.
well, I thought. Not again, as much as I put this game up there with any, of course there are times when you can explore and you think, oh come on, I just want to get to the next part. I just want to get this bit done with. But because it is a big game, I almost kind of give it a slight pass. There's so much I enjoy that the moments that do lag a little bit, they're few and far between because the exploration is great fun, I think.
Yeah, adding on top of that, there are Metroidvania elements to it, especially on the hub planet Kobo. You see something, and this is maybe where I'm getting my Breath of the Wild inspiration from, is you can look at something on Kobo and be like, ah, I don't know how to do that yet. Let me come back later.
Yeah.
I think that's done better because in Fallen Order, there's stuff where I feel like I can do that. And then you're like, oh, no, I can't do that. And then you just feel kind of defeated, which is not a good feeling to have in a game.
Not when you're trying to be a Jedi.
Yeah, this game really says, no, if you can get over there, you can figure it out. The game's a lot better at telling you when it's time to be like, hey, you can't get here yet. I forget what specific scenario it was, but there's a place on Kobo where I was like, I saw a place for something, and I'm like, ah, I think I know what I need to get
Mhm.
here. I don't have that, but I'm glad I see it so I can make notes to come back here later.
Yeah. But that's the
Uh,
fun. You get rewarded for it. And it isn't just go over there and hey, cool, that was fun. There is something at the end of it, or there is a little bit of a lore dump, or something for the data bank, or you mentioned the customization is insane in this game, like to the detail with which you can customize almost every aspect of Cal and his equipment. You almost want to explore just so you can find out what else you can
yeah,
use. I really appreciate that. You mentioned the price point. It's an expensive game. I feel like I feel like people will get their money's worth out of this game you get out as much as you put in, but I think there's so much to get out of this. I was excited to explore certain planets, which I can't always say about similar games.
Um, I actually want to see how much time I put into this game. I'm seeing if I can look it up. I'll see. Survivor.
I remember how
Nope.
much I've put in.
I put in 2 days, 5 hours, and 21 minutes in
Wow,
game.
50 hours, give or take. I think I've put just shy of 100 hours in, but that is over the course of a year and a half almost. But
Yeah.
that's tiny compared to some people. I have played through the game on more than one occasion as well.
Yeah. I started a new game plus when they added that in later. I think we're talking about price point, and it's fantastic for the price. Let's see. Going off that, I know we've talked about the stance system. We've talked a little bit about the exploration. Do we want to give some time to the puzzle system and traversal? I don't feel like they're really that much improved, but we can talk about it if we want.
I think Fallen Order was very heavy on its puzzling, and some of it was extremely puzzling. Some of it was like ridiculously convoluted. Like you got to throw the ball there, and then you've got to push something there, and you've got to use wind to get that. It was a little bit too much at times. So I think here in Survivor, the puzzles are far more sporadic, which I appreciate. You don't even have to do them to complete the game, which is great. There are still puzzles in the game, and there is still one which left me almost throwing my control at the wall, just could not get it. But they are a lot less challenging this time, I'd say, or they're as challenging as you want them to be because it's up to you whether you do some of them. I appreciate that. I don't like games being, for want of a better term, dumbed down. Like
Mhm.
games being made so easy that they're not a challenge. But at the same time, with a game like Survivor, there's so much going on. I don't think you need to be bogged down and spending an extra hour or two on a specific puzzle because, like you mentioned, you've got to get the reaction time just right and you've got to pull this and that. There needs to be an element of user friendability, if you will, to it. I think Survivor had a better balance of gameplay, satisfying gameplay, satisfying puzzling than Fallen Order, just because there's less of them, just because there's less to do.
Yeah. And on that note, I think it made it easier because I think there's a certain setting you can do on one of the easier difficulties. Because I'll play on easy first, then play on normal, and then whatever
Same.
from there. Because I like to enjoy the game first and then go from
I don't
there.
want to be spoiled either. Austin, I played Fallen Order. Oh, I'll never forget. And everyone will say, "Well, that's on you." Maybe. I was playing Fallen Order. I was getting to the end. No spoilers. No spoilers. I was getting to
Hmm.
the end, and anyone who's played Fallen Order, you know what happens at the end. You know, like wow, the big wow moment. I went on YouTube to look at. I think I was looking at a recipe or something like a name, and in the sidebar was you know thumbnail with what was happening in the end. And I was like,
I
man,
got
like
the same spoiler.
exactly. So that whole thing got spoiled for me. It didn't make it any less awesome. So what I found since then with Survivor and Outlaws as well is I'll play on story mode. I'll blast through the story. I'll enjoy it still, but I want to experience a story for myself. I want the story to dictate how I feel, not oh I know what's coming, so I'll prepare for it, and then I'll go back and do a lot more. On my first playthrough of Survivor, less exploration, more story.
Mhm.
Also because I was just so into the story. I didn't want to get spoiled, dude, because the spoiler culture we live in now. I'm with you. Easy to start with, and then more challenging second time round.
I say that because I think there's a setting where you can have it hint at puzzles. And that was really helpful for me because I'm really bad at puzzles. Like you talk about throw controller moments. That was Zepho for me with Fallen Order. I had to quit the game for like 2 days.
I know which bit you
Uh,
mean,
uh
or bits you mean.
yeah, the ball thing. I was like, oh my gosh, I was stuck on that for days.
It just didn't feel. And again, I love that game. I'll never stop saying how much I love these games.
Hmm.
But at the same time, nothing is immune from criticism. Some of those puzzles in the first game, it didn't feel like a natural thing. Maybe hardcore gamers will say it did, but you got to do that. It just didn't feel like an organic way of doing the puzzles. It felt a little bit convoluted and it wasn't the most enjoyable. Even on second, third, fourth, fifth playthrough of Fallen Order, I still struggle. Even though I know how to do it, I still struggle on how to actually complete these puzzles. And yeah, that is one of the drawbacks from that game.
Yeah, but I'm glad it's being a little bit more accessible this playthrough. There were points where I'm just like, I don't know if I want to keep playing this game. So points for that. Getting more into the story and characters. Let's talk about the new and returning characters. What do you think of the new and returning characters? I don't want to spoil too much.
Well, first off, greasy money, baby, is what I think about Grease. But yeah, that at a top level thought, I think everyone is built upon, and everyone gets their moment. The characters' journeys in this game feel earned. They feel like a natural progression from Fallen Order, including that time jump between games. It doesn't feel like they are totally different to whom we meet in
Mhm.
that first game, because if characters are in a different place, everything is explained, everything is extolled upon us, but without sitting in front of a PowerPoint presentation. It's all done via dialogue, of which I think the writing is very good. Yeah, I think the in a non-spoiler aspect, I think the returning characters are all handled very well. In terms of the new characters, they're integrated very seamlessly into the story and the world that Respawn have created. I think the character that's in the trailer, Bo, is such a cool, compelling character. The introduction of one of the antagonists that we see in the trailer
Mhm.
seemed like a very huge left field pitch at the time. I think it works well enough. There's a few things I'd like to have seen differently. The new baddies in this, the new villains are, I don't want to say they're a mixed bag because I think they're all very good. I just think they're different levels of good. And the again, it's with okay, I won't go any further because of spoilers, but
Yeah.
I think everyone here serves a purpose. I think the majority are handled very well or brought back in. There are some instances though where I think I would have liked a bit more with you, and I'd have liked to have heard a bit more about what you can bring to the table. But there wasn't anyone I thought, no, we don't need you. What about you? Are you a fan of as someone who played Fallen Order quite close to playing Survivor? Did it feel natural?
So no. Um,
Ooh.
because for those who aren't in the know, and this is going to be an extremely Star Wars nerdy thing for me to say, but they released a tie-in book that
I've got it
covers
over
that.
there.
Yeah, it's called Battle Scars.
Yes.
Um, that I read like the week before it released, and I feel like some of those details are really important when you're playing Jedi Survivor, and the game completely leaves out. And I'm like, because again, you said 5 year time jump, and
Yeah.
I I read that a book and I'm like, oh, this should have been in the game. This should have been in the game. Even if it's just that I know we talked about it earlier, that 2 minute recap
Hmm.
um, of just like, hey, here's what everyone's been up to. Here's Fallen Order, and then here's the what happened a little bit. I don't know. Maybe they could have reworked some things to work parts of the book in, but
And Respawn helped in the development of that book as well,
yeah,
to an
yeah.
extent. And the book as well, I will say, listen, Austin, I'm saying how much I love these games. I would die in the hill of these games. That book though, oh, the first half of that
It's
is
it's rough.
it is a rough, but the second half is a lot better when it gets into its groove. But the first half is it is bad at times, and I don't like saying that, but it ain't good, but it gets better.
I wish I still had screenshots that I took while reading on Kindle because my library allows you to rent ebooks um,
Nice.
and allows you to like port it over to your Kindle library. Um, and um, literally the first half of the way it's written is just recapping things that just happened, like being so in detail about things that are happening that it's just like, come on with it already. Like
Yeah.
the first chapter is, um, this isn't spoilers because it happens in the first 5 pages. It's just a spacewalk with Cal, and it's describing everything he's doing in explicit detail. And I'm like, dude, let's just move on. We
Yeah.
understand how a spacewalk works. Um,
And it's not always particularly well described. And there are times when certain characters don't quite feel like they've been adapted excellently. Certain characters like Grease and Seer, I think, are very well written. I'll give Sam Maggs all the credit in the world. I think she captures them very well. Cal and Marion, they kind of fluctuate between being the characters I know and love and, ooh, I don't know about that, but I kind of headcanon it as in everyone grows, experiences change people, so they're not going to be the same. But I also look at it and say that's just terrible writing at some points. It's just not great. And yeah, I know what you mean. There are some instances like the book lays the foundations for where people went, where we start Survivor. So I wouldn't, and the dialogue of the game does go, it touches upon things,
Mhm.
but of course, like you say, had they had a prologue where it was not adapting parts of the novel, but just little bits, then I think that would have been a very, very handy way to get people up to speed. But at the same time, I think the game itself, the way the story plays out, I think it wants you to kind of find this out as you go along. But
Mhm.
yeah, there are things which I think, yep, they could have probably expanded upon slightly.
Yeah, and there's specific stuff we'll talk about in spoilers, because
Mm.
we've got a lot to talk about in spoilers. I feel like the whole game is spoilers,
Oh yeah.
but yeah, that's the one major criticism I can levy against this game, is that the character development is kind of hamstrung um by having that companion book um fill in some of those blanks. Um, I mean, the game does a great job, but like there are specific characters. I'm trying to dodge spoilers for the game,
Yeah.
um, where it really explicitly colors in some lines that you really need to know for the book for the game. So
Yeah.
so that's really the only big piece of criticism. And then let's actually skip this larger Star Wars universe question. Um, so let's get into how did the most controversial part of I think the game upon launch. Um, Something that I'm still running into problems with. How did the game perform for you?
I am extremely sorry to say that the game ran very smoothly for me on my PlayStation 5. I ran into no errors. Genuinely. Every now and then you'd get a glitch or something where you might see a stormtrooper in the distance rather than walking is kind of floating. But in
Mhm.
terms of like game breaking issues, none whatsoever. And I that's why I do feel bad for everybody who has suffered. And I'm not going to pretend that this game hasn't had issues. This is, I think, comfortably the worst AAA release launch since obviously since Cyberpunk 2077,
Yeah.
and that is painful to say because I wanted everything about this to be perfect, and it does it upsets me in that kind of detached way when I hear that so many people didn't have the same experience that I did, and I think I just got lucky. I must have done because I genuinely didn't have any of the issues that anybody else has, and I've since watched lots of YouTube videos and listened to lots of podcasts where people are saying you know, I like the game, but I can't put it in top tier or I can't put it in a game of the year conversation because at the time because it was horrific on launch. I didn't experience that, so I can't speak to the issue. So I am quite interested in hearing what actually went wrong when you played it then.
So the game crashed for me 5 times during week of release. And when I
Ooh.
say crash, I don't mean like just like stopped and then like started back up. I meant the game force closed itself. Um, and then asked me to submit a bug report. Because that's what Xbox does is like every time it force closes a game, it'll ask you to submit a bug report. So I submitted 5 different bug reports saying the exact same thing. It's like I was just playing the game and it froze and then the game closed. Um, and then I actually have a YouTube short of this one. So I'll include it in the YouTube description. Um, but I was going down a zip line and I happened to turn the camera so you could see. Cal's face,
Yeah.
and his hair was like spikes in like 300 different directions. Um, and obviously, it looks worse on my end because it's on the Series S, um, which is a less powerful console. But um, but yeah, I ran into a bunch of bugs. Some I didn't even like document, but it crashed heaps of times. Um, to the point where at one point I got midway through the game and I'm like, I'm gonna stop playing until the next patch because at that
Yeah.
point they were talking. Respawn was like, here's our first launch post launch patch. That's supposed to fix like 100 plus problems, and I waited for that to finish the game. Um, but some problems still aren't fixed.
So I hear, yeah.
Like dynamic resolution scaling, which is for those who aren't aware, um, is where like things that are far away are lower resolution, but things that are closer to the camera are higher resolution. Sometimes it would just fail to render certain instances, especially on Kobo is the main problem area, or I guess problem planet. Um,
Yeah.
um, Especially in like the little water pools where you'll find the fish guy,
Scuba.
scuba, scuba,
Oh, that
yeah.
guy.
Um, which I didn't even mention him in new and returning characters. He's one of my favorite
That guy
guys.
is great. I could sit and watch that, listen to that guy's stories all day, and I did more
I
than
did,
once. But
yeah.
it's
I
just to your point, though. I mean, sorry to interject, but we
No,
mentioned
good.
we've praised the price point so much and said, well, the game gives you so much, but let's not pretend. I mean, obviously I'm kind of speaking vicariously through you now. You laid out a lot of money for this game.
Mhm.
You got part way through and thought, do you know what? I'm not going to play until they sort this out. That is not value for money. So on one hand, it is. On the other hand, you get so many technical issues that your emotional experience is destroyed, and that is what really frustrates me. It shouldn't have been released in the state it was. And that unfortunately does go to Stig Asmussen, who was the one who okayed it for release, not EA, not Respawn. It was, I love Stig, but it was Stig who did it. And there is no way this game should have been released in
Yeah,
that state because for you, you spent all that money and you didn't get the same experience I did, which is maddening for me because it shouldn't be that way.
yeah. Like I was literally in the middle of a boss fight once, and it forced closed, and I had to replay an hour of the game
Ooh.
because,
Yeah.
and that's another thing. The autosave system is not kind in this
Hmm.
version versus Jedi Fallen Order.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, that was like the one major detractor for me. I need to go back and reinstall it. Um, I'd be interested to see with the Xbox One release if I get the choice because Xbox does this thing called Smart Delivery. If there's a way I can install the Xbox One version and the Series S version to compare,
Hmm.
um, because that'd be kind of interesting just to see. Because I wonder if performance would be better if I forced it to play the Xbox One version.
Yeah. It's good call.
Um, because then you don't have the constraints of like, hey, we want you to render this at 1440p and then downsample to my TV in the living room that's 1080p. Um, and instead just render 1080p at like 5 frames per second or whatever. Um, so yeah. Um, but but yeah, and that's the main reason we're talking about it today is it's now out on Xbox One and PS4, and that makes me really
Crazy.
yeah, it's crazy, right? Because they said
Hmm.
um in the run up to the game's release, hey, we're not going to be able to put this on past gen now. I don't call PS4 and Xbox One current gen. No, I mean
Yeah.
technically it is, but college football 25 is not on PS4 and Xbox One, so PS5 and Xbox Series are current gen. Um, Although Madden 25 is still on PS4 and Xbox One, but that's beside the point. I would really be interested to see how it performs. on there. Um, but yeah, really quick, before we get
Yep.
into spoilers, and don't worry, everyone, if you haven't played the game, um, I'll have a spoiler warning, um, after we talk after we wrap up. But I just want to before we get into spoilers, what is your like final rating of the game out of 5 stars?
It won't come as any surprise to anyone. You call me biased. This is a 5-star game for me. It is a five because I can, in my experience, like I didn't have the technical issues, I didn't have the bugs, I didn't have the errors and the crashes, so I can only rate it on my experience. How did I feel going into it? How did I feel having played it? Did the moments hit throughout which were intended to? Did I get what I wanted from the characters? Did the new ones hit? Do I feel like there's a place for this story? Was it emotional? Everything is a yes for me. So it would be easy to say, oh, he's a Star Wars fan. He's going to give it 5 out of 5. I don't give an awful lot 5 out of 5, and that goes in terms of film reviews as well. There's not much I will give. I'll give fives when I want to. I'm not. It's not a holy thing where you can't give it a 5, but I don't give
Yeah,
it to everything. But as a critic, I believe that my review should be based on my experience, not what I feel like
of
you guys
course.
should be getting. It's what did I get, and I have to then explain why, or extol upon you why it gave me those feelings and emotions and reactions to warrant such a high score. And that's what it is. It's an emotive thing reviewing. You know what I mean? You could look at it and say, well, hold on, 5 out of 5 for this film. That's the same as Godfather 2. So, yeah, but I'm not saying it's on the same level. I'm just saying, this film or this game did everything I wanted to do. So for me, it's a 5, but I
Mhm.
don't expect anybody else to say that. And I'm interested to see what you would give this game.
So I give it a 4.
And
Um,
that's a good score still.
yeah, I mean, I it's it equates to an 8 out of 10 on the IGN scale, uh,
Yep.
or on a regular video game scale. I just don't like using 10 points because I think it gets too granular at that point. Um, but anyhow, I give it that because I had a litany of technical issues. I mean,
Yeah.
a litany. I bet Well, I don't want to bet that it's still like that today. I know they didn't do it. Respawn didn't issue another patch when the Xbox One version came out. Literally today, as we're recording this.
Mm.
Um, but um, but I would. I'm curious how it runs now. And maybe I'll like post a thing on Threads or something about like, hey, you know how I complained about this on Twitter? Well, here's my new like evaluation of it because I do still have that new game plus save file. Um,
Hmm.
um, but yeah, 4 stars because of the technical issues, but not just because of that. I have a lot of issues with the story that we'll talk about in spoilers. I wish I could talk about the story in spoiler-free discussion, but literally all my problems have to do with spoilers. Um, like I know we talked about one of the antagonists. I literally can't say his name because I feel like that spoils a big part of the game's story. Um, and I won't say why because that's also a spoiler in and of itself. Um, so yeah, I the story didn't work for me, and not just because I think it relies a lot on the companion book. But also I don't think it stands as well on its own shoulders or as on its own merits that Jedi Fallen Order did. Like Jedi Fallen Order really was like, yeah, it's post Order 66, but here are some twists that you weren't expecting. Here are like uh themes of trauma, found family, um, forgiveness, um, and all these things that even if you're not a Star Wars fan, you could really sink your teeth into. Look up the Gamer's Little Playground movie. That's probably 3 or 4 hours, and I think you'll have the same experience. Now, if, but I can't say that somebody else. who had that experience playing Fallen Order would have that experience, especially if they haven't read the book. Um, so yeah, I just think it leans a little bit too much on the companion book, but I understand that's a byproduct, so to speak, of Disney Star Wars is that every um, thing that comes out, even the Acolyte. I think we were talking about it in the pre-show um, before we hit record. The Acolyte, it's going to have its own book that I think
Yeah.
continues its story. And it's like, okay, I don't really need a book for that, but literally everything has literally everything Star Wars now has a companion book that either explains or continues the story from something you've either seen or played before. So yeah, that's why I give it a 4. Maybe it'll go up to a 5 if those issues are fixed,
Hmm.
and I play it again. But I'm gonna use the gamer meme of press X to doubt, um, because they were very serious foundational problems that we'll get into when talking about spoilers. But I guess speaking of spoilers, this is your point of no return. We're gonna be delving into the game's plot, any questions we have about the game very, very shortly. So if you haven't played the game and want to avoid spoilers, I'll have a chapter marked either final thoughts or social media plugs. Either one of those are in the episode's description on YouTube or your favorite podcast service. You should, fingers crossed, should um, be able to click on one of those and it'll take you right to the spoiler free discussion where we're just like giving final thoughts or plugging our stuff. So, um, now that that's said, let's talk about Bode.
Big Bode. Well, this is going to be a fun discussion because obviously I really have an affinity with the story and the characters, and I'm really excited to hear, your perspective on them and how it differs from mine. And that's the beauty of having a discussion on the internet with people who aren't crazy. That we can accept each other's point of view without trying to kill each other. But Bode, right? Listen, straight up, I suspected nothing. I did not see anything coming. Now, I know some people say they knew immediately that Bode was going to be a bad egg, and you yourself may have thought that, but for me, I didn't. I did not see it at all. Of course, in hindsight, there are red flags there. When I was like, really just going for it for the first playthrough, I didn't suspect anything. I was just like, okay, this guy's a cool dude, and Bode is a cool dude. I mean, the way he uses that jetpack, I'm like, man, you're so cool. But
We better get one in number 3. The way Cal talks about how much he likes jetpacks.
that is one thing I think. Oh, it's something like that. I also think we're going to finally be able to fly the Mantis. I think that's one of the mechanics they're going to bring in is we'll be flying that ship. Which okay, well, I'll save that for later.
Yeah.
But yeah, Bode, I didn't suspect it because I believed in the bond that those characters had. A lot of that was due to Noshir Dalal's voice performance, voice acting. I think he's fantastic, as is Cameron Monaghan, obviously.
Mhm.
But I didn't. Looking back, I could see it. He's a desperate father. He tries to talk Cal out of going to Tanalorr with the hidden path for fear of the Empire finding them, and knowing that Cal can't hold the Empire back. I was floored though when the twist happened. Somebody who loves Star Wars and just loves good storytelling. I was floored when the twist happened. The Force push was one thing, but then when he says, "You're not the only one who survived," my jaw hit the floor. I was like, okay, where did this come from? And I'm in. Is this something which you saw from a mile off?
A
Because I
mile
didn't.
away. Like
You did?
more than a mile. Like if it, instead of a mile, I saw it from like a yard or
The trailer.
like yeah, like I saw it from like the next continent over. Like as soon as I saw him
Man.
like we talked about the intro level where like Bode helps you up. I'm like, I don't trust this guy. There's something off about him. And
Hmm.
then like I play more through the game and like you see his red flags and I'm like, something's fishy. And then like just before it happens, I'm like, he's about to turn on us. Um, Now, did I know he was a double agent the whole time? Not for certain until like right before we get to Jeddah, the third time, I believe, when we have to deliver the MacGuffin device to the guy from the first game, um,
Cordova. Yep.
Cordova, which that was more of a surprise than Bode being the traitor. I was like, you see him for the first time, I'm like, you're
Yeah. And the
alive?
music swells, and I'm like, God, this is great. I'm here. I'm so in.
Like I was BD8, not BD8. No, yeah, BD8. Uh,
BD1.
BD1. Thank you. I was BD1 in that moment. We're like, what? Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, I saw it coming from a mile away. I do think they did a really good job of motivations. Um, like for like his motivations being like, hey, I got to keep my daughter safe. And I made a deal with the Empire so that yeah, as long as I'm working for them, she is safe. Like I could understand that. And I think they did that very well. Now the whole like you're not the only Jedi survivor. I'm like,
Oh, I
okay.
loved it.
I was hitting my I was face palming when I heard that line
What was
because
it that just didn't work then?
it felt like a real oh, let's roll credits moment. He said the name of the game. Um and like I'm not like cinema sins or anything like that where I'm like, oh, he said the name.
Yeah.
Um but like but but I am of the notion of like when somebody says the title of something like Will Smith and Suicide Squad, like what are we, some kind of Suicide Squad or something like
Oh.
that? Um, or like the end of Fantastic Four 2015, where it's like, say that again. It's fantastic. It's like, okay, come on.
There are
It,
ways to finesse it.
yeah, like I felt like there was a bit like just a force push was enough to be like, oh, he's a Jedi. Okay, cool. I can operate from there. Like I didn't need to hear anything. Um, Although I will say, I really did like the first boss fight you have with him. I hesitate to call it even a boss fight, because you lose, and the game treats it like, no, this is game over. The game's over. Uh, and then it's like, oh, no, just kidding.
Yeah. The
That
respawn screen comes up, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. And then I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, I would have been fine if that's how the game ended, honestly. Um, because it because I think I have a sick, twisted thing in my mind where I'm like, I want the hero to lose because, um, like, um, spoilers for Ahsoka, play the siren from the Death Star, the klaxon sound. Um, but in Ahsoka, at the end of that miniseries, they lose,
Hmm.
and that really worked for me because it's like, yeah, that's what would realistically happen in a situation where you just learned, and really deep spoilers for Ahsoka now, that Thrawn is alive, the Night Sisters of Dathomir are alive, and that the one person from Mandalorian season 2 or 3, the Magistrate, is also a Night
Yes,
Sister.
Morgan. Yep.
Yeah, um, is a Night Sister. I'm like, okay, yeah, realistically, there's no winning this situation. Plus, you came out of some weird time vortex thing, but I really love that aspect of things. But yeah, uh, but yeah, I just have that sick, twisted part of me. I'm like, oh yeah, I love when heroes lose.
But it is
Um,
it is a nice change up though, isn't it? Sometimes Empire Strikes Back to an extent did that. Of course, at the end you get the hopeful ending. Same with Revenge of the Sith if we're going to keep it in universe, because you need it sometimes. You need heroes have got to bounce back from something eventually. Because I don't anticipate the end of this series being so doom and gloom that you look back at this series and think, oh my God, that was depressing. But you need adversity. You need to overcome something. And I agree. That's what I like about that mini boss fight. I really quite like because if you think about everything that leads up to it, especially from the first game, listen, everyone Cal ever gets close to dies.
Mhm.
From the beginning of Fallen Order with his mate Prouf to his master Jaro Tapal, to an extent the second sister, they started to understand each other. In this game, his entire crew on Coruscant, um, Cordova, Bode himself betrayed him. Nothing this guy does ends well, Cal. And now he thinks he's finally got a chance to be free. They've got the MacGuffin, they can go to Tanalor. And Bode, of all people,
Hmm.
his brother, turns on him, murders Cordova, and runs off. The guy, you would not be in any kind of headspace to deal with that, which is why I quite like the fact that, and also finding out that he's an ex-Jedi. You imagine what that does to the psyche. So I quite like the fact that they just went through with it, and Bode has the upper hand and he has the high ground in every sense there. So I'm glad that they went through with that, and of course it leads us into a spectacular set piece after that. I think.
Yeah, the chase and everything. Spe- Spectacular. I'll take 14 more.
Yeah.
Um, but I guess speaking of like sick and twisted desires, Cal uh taps into his dark side in this game. Um,
Were
how do
you,
we
were you
feel?
happy about that?
I'm real happy about that. Oh my gosh. Because it, for one, it makes character sense because he's like this tortured Jedi. He's not a regular Jedi. Like, I almost feel like it makes more sense to have a um, Jedi who grew up in the Order 66 era to have like tap into the dark side. I almost thought that's something that should Kane and Jarrus should have done in
Hmm.
Rebels. Um, and a bunch of the other Jedi's. I don't think we should be having so many Order 66 era Jedi's. We can move away from that, but yeah, I think it worked very well for his character, and I think it worked really well for the gameplay too. I think it almost works as, Stig, he worked on the God of War games. It works kind of as this kind of rage mode mechanic.
Yeah.
And I think it just works very well. And I think the first time it happens, I don't think I know the first time it happened, I was like, oh, you're all dead.
Yeah. Here we go.
It's like when it's like time slows down, the screen turns red, and it's
They're not
just,
subtle, are they?
nah, it was just like, he is on no no ifs, ands, or buts about it, but he is on demon mode.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
it was fantastic. I hope that they kind of continue that into the third game
Yeah, I
because
think it was inevitable. I think from the
yeah,
beginning of this game, it was inevitable that this was going to happen and had to happen. Seer, his master or his second master, she tapped into the dark side. That was an extremely important part of Fallen Order,
yeah,
and an extremely important part of why she set up the archive on Jeddah so she could preserve the good, preserve the Jedi. At the beginning of the game, Cal, you see him snarling at the Ninth Sister when she kills his crew. He's about to throw down. He's ready to slice her up, and of course he does. Cal's insistence on fighting, like actual fighting throughout the game.
mhm,
He loses Seer, loses his friends, Bode's betrayal. Everything. It felt inevitable that this was going to happen, and like you say, it's rage mode. It's a cheat code almost, isn't it? It gives the player
yeah,
like an easy out, and let's not. It felt good using the dark side, the allure, the seduction, and that's the thing. And the devs knew that the dark side is an easy route, but one that it can consume you. As soon as I had that option to use a dark side for the dark side power, sorry, from that moment on, I used it as much as I could. I was
yeah,
like, I need to get out of this situation. There's 5 purge troopers and 10 stormtroopers coming at me. I'm not messing around here. Dark side, throw the saber, kill every single one of them, and get on with it. I gave in to the dark side in that moment, and I was very pleased to do so. And I absolutely think Cal will be dealing with it going forward. Like, and then I don't know. The next story depends as well on the time jump. Is it going to be a year later, 6 months, 5 years? Are they going to, how? What are they going to do with that? You have to. I kind of do. I do wonder if it's going to be another 5 year time jump because 5 years of somebody struggling that badly with the dark side will weigh upon you. So I do wonder if this, in this case, they'll say, right, we're having a 2 year time jump. So it's easier to kind of explain why he has, we can look at the his relationship with the dark side, but then also there are other characters that get brought into the family. How are they going to do it? There's a lot to work with, and I think that dark side thing is going to. I think that's going to be the catalyst going forward. So I'm really pleased that they dealt with it, started it here, and didn't introduce it in the third and probably final game, and kind of rush through it. So I
Yeah,
like that we get to use it here. And again, it was very fun.
very fun. Kind of like when you get the dual wield sabers at the end of Fallen Order.
Come on, yeah,
Like,
yeah.
come on. Um, but I know we talked about it really briefly, or you talked about it really briefly. But let's touch on Seer's death. How did you feel about that? Like, did it feel earned, for lack of a better term, for you?
Again, for me, yes, because I invested so much in these games and in these characters, and it felt, Cal's lost another master, another friend, another connection. So it felt vital for his story. He's now on his own. He's facing the galaxy, the Empire, and himself alone. And speaking as somebody who loves Seer, again, I'm sitting here with her lightsaber there. I love the character of Seer, but I think her natural story ended here. You could have had her going into the next game, and who doesn't want to hear Deborah Wilson as Seer? I do, but it came to a breathtakingly good conclusion in this game. What else do you do with the character? It comes down to, do I want more of the character? Absolutely, but what more can you do without it feeling like a stretch? That's what I feel like with Seer. She's so powerful. How much? How long do you want her running around in the galaxy for? Before it also starts to impede on the wider Star Wars story. There is those constraints, but I do think it was earned. I think it felt like I've used this phrase a lot in this show, but it felt like a natural progression from Fallen Order. At the end of Fallen Order, she gives into fear with Vader almost. She gives into the dark side, and she can't beat him. She knows she can't beat him, and it's only Cal smashing the window on the base to let the ocean in that stops him. Here, she says it. I've let go of my fear. She's not scared of this guy anymore, and she absolutely whoops him. And well, she gives as good as she gets. I'll say that because at the same time, she's one of the only Jedi Masters surviving out there. And she's not a punk. If I know lots of people say she shouldn't be able to stand up to Vader, but she's a Jedi Master. She's got all of her limbs. Vader hasn't. She can, she isn't scared of him. A lot of the other people who face Vader are frightened of him, and that's why they lose. She's not. And yet ultimately she doesn't make it out of it. And anyone, I think most people who went into that fight, we all knew what was going to happen. We know she's not getting out of this, but how was it going to go down? So I think it was earned. I think it was really well done. I think the aftermath was excellently handled. The problem I find with a lot of media, including Star Wars, sometimes is you'll have a big moment, like a shattering moment, but it's not dwell. They don't. Nobody dwells upon it, or they move on too quickly. I don't feel like they did here. They gave Seer's death the proper send off with the characters afterwards mourning, and then it actually continued to permeate through the story up until the very end. Seer's presence is there, and she feels like the Obi-Wan of the story, intentionally or not. I think it is, but no, I do think that her death was earned, especially again. Prior to that, she finally said to Cal, "Yeah, I'll come with you to Tanalorr," because she didn't want to join the fight. But now she's like, "Do you know what? This is Tanalor's a way out for all of our families. I will join you." Everyone's happy. They're drinking tea. They're joking. Austin, Bode's joining in the jokes, and then it ain't gonna last, and it's all hell breaks loose. I think it was And again, I haven't given enough credit. I've got the soundtrack down there on vinyl, but Gordy Harb and Stephen Barton's soundtrack score, sorry, is insane in this, and the way the music hits in throughout the fight and in her death, chef's kiss. I think it's really well done. Now I'm very interested now for you to say you hated it or something.
No, it worked. It worked. Like I don't have much more to add. Um, other than I didn't hate it. I loved it. I know we didn't talk about soundtrack, but yeah, it just works here. I think it was one of the score moments where I'm like, okay, if this doesn't win at the Game Awards, what are we doing? And it
It won the
didn't.
Grammys.
But oh, it did win the Grammys. I
It
remember that.
won best. I don't know. It's a big old long title, but basically it won best video games or multimedia score at the Grammys. So
Oh,
Grammy
good,
award winning soundtrack.
good, because it is a great soundtrack. But yeah, Seer's death was very earned. As soon as I saw her on Jeddah, with the archives, I'm like, okay, I know she's not making it out of this because if the Jedi had the archives, I feel like they'd be more well versed when it comes to uh like you would have had to have something in this game to be like, hey, Luke Skywalker, here's the Jedi archives.
Yep.
Um, I feel like the sequel trilogy doesn't work if the Jedi archives are existing.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, felt super earned. We get a great outro with her. Oh, it was one of the best moments of the game for me. You know, you get to control Seer for the first time, and um,
Oh,
and you're just like you've got I think ATSTs coming in the area, which you had already been like you see them in the overworld of the game. Um, but now you get to just absolutely wreak havoc on them. Or I'm sorry, is it AT-ATs that you see in the overworld? Is that the chicken walker
it
ones?
is ATST. No, you're right. Yep.
Okay. Because you see the chicken walkers in the overworld,
Hmm.
but you never see like the big honker elephant ones.
Well,
Um,
you take those out with the big giant stone balls, don't you? You roll them down the
yeah,
hill and take those out.
which took me longer to realize that's what I had to do.
Yeah.
Um, I just thought I'd like throw my lightsaber and just like go like do a Force Unleashed um kind of like move where you're like
Rip them
mashing
apart.
X, yeah, where you're like taking the head and impaling it or something, or taking the leg off and impaling. But um, and in fact, it felt very uh much like Force Unleashed, specifically Force Unleashed 2, in that aspect, where you're just like, okay, let us give you the ultimate power fantasy
Yeah.
before Seer goes out like a champ. Um,
And it sets her up, it sets her power level as well for when I always allude to this because I've seen so many people saying, and I say it again, Vader should have wiped the floor. You know, there's too much fanboyism about Vader. Vader should have wiped the floor with her. It's not. That's not how it works. And also, we've just played with Seer for that amount of time, and we've just seen her, like you said, dude, taking out AT-ATs, taking out ATSTs, helping to take out waves of stormtroopers and purge troopers. To say then that that person should be, beaten like that is crazy. They set her power level up, so when you fight Vader, it isn't as much of a surprise that you can go toe to toe with, the Dark Lord of the Sith himself.
yeah, yeah, I totally agree. I didn't have a problem with her almost defeating Vader. I do have a little problem though, a little problem that causes problems with lore. At this point, we already know that force healing is a thing. Come on. You're meaning to tell me that um a Sabine can get stabbed through the abdomen and survive and Seer can't? I I don't know about
That's
that.
something I've chalked up to that. I think to me that's a Dave Filoni issue
Okay.
because it really only happens in things that Dave's attached to. Because people said about the Acolyte, well, hold on, one of these characters gets a knife thrown at them and dies. Well, yeah, that's what would happen. The Acolyte is doing it right. Like Jedi Survivor is doing it correctly. If you get a lightsaber through the gut, game over. That is it. So I think the inconsistencies come from other places I look at. That's where I see it from. But and also in terms of like the Force, I just look at it like, well, some people can do this, some people can do that. Like Cal can use psychometry and sense what happened to Seer, and Luke Skywalker, he can't do that. But then again, he wasn't trained. But then Ray can do this that Cal can't do. I think it's quite cool that they almost have their own individual. like move sets almost. Like you
Hmm.
can do that, and you can do that, and you can do that. I think it's cool, but yeah, I think the like the force, or sorry, the ability to withstand a lightsaber is more of a. And I love Dave Filoni, but it is more of a Dave Filoni issue where yeah, if you get stabbed, you gotta that's game over. Like Qui-Gon, Qui-Gon didn't come back in the Phantom Menace, so nobody else should.
I'm
But
still sore about that. I'm still so sore.
Qui-Gon
Like,
was great. Still
like
is.
20 plus years later, I'm still like, if I was Qui-Gon, I'd be like, you guys knew how to do this and you
What
didn't even
about me?
try.
Yeah, no, I mean, and I know they pass it off, and I have as whirlwind conversations that with Sabine, they make a concerted effort to show that it missed her gut, but it's a lightsaber which is burning through you at the I don't even know what temperature that thing is going through you at. You aren't surviving it, and I credit the Acolyte and Jedi Survivor and things like that for making lightsabers, not to use a phrase associated with anybody else, but making lightsabers lethal again. Making them feel like a legitimate game over weapon. Once that thing's drawn, you either survive or run, or
Yeah.
you'll die. Sorry, yeah. So,
Yeah. And going back into characters, let's talk about Calamari. What do you think about that? Like they finally get together in this game. Um, I hate to use the same question, but well, not does it feel earned, but how do you think it felt like finally fulfilling that promise from Fallen Order, where it very much is like she's flirting with him, but doesn't know it, and Cal's like, I don't know what to do. I've never been around a girl.
exactly.
Um, uh, what did you think about that relationship?
Yeah, it's a fist bump moment for me when it finally happened, and a lot of it comes down to context as well. Like the moment in which they finally kiss, it's after they've tried to save the brother Armias, the I can't think of what the anchorite, whatever he's called, from being crushed. They're trying to save the hidden path and the secrets and basically save that organization. He gets killed, and then they've got to rush out. And how are they going to get out of this? Because that massive drill's there, uh, and it's the franticness and the excitement of it. And then you get that, and I'm like, yeah, that feels right. And the classic Star Wars line of, was what was that for? And she's like, it was for. Oh no, was that for luck? No, it was for me. I think it's very earned because of the fallen order dynamic. And again, in Survivor, they have the moment where you meet Mary and she's the one you're there to meet. They have their discussion about, what she went away for, what she found. Um, and they have the discussion in the cave as well, which is excellently shot
Mhm.
about letting the fire consume you and essentially just finding yourself in all of this chaos of which she has done. And you can see in Cal's eyes, he's like, man, I've been fighting this stupid fight, and Merrin's gone off, and she's found herself, and she's at such a different place now, where she and Seer they're fighting the Empire, but in such a bigger way than Cal ever did. They're helping people. Cal isn't. So when you get to their relationship, it is a fist bump moment, and when Cal's like, "I know what I want now. I know what I should be focusing on," and they have another kiss in the night before everything goes to hell and back. It feels so right, and. Mm, it's another thing. We're going to touch upon it throughout, but I just hope they follow it up in that third game. We'll whether we I guess we'll touch on the third game later, but I just hope they follow up on that because it felt right. It felt good. And a Jedi and a Night Sister, they don't travel well. They're survivors, and it's not your standard pairing. It isn't Jedi and Jedi. There are conflicts there which are again, I hope they explore. Their outlook on life is different. Their outlook on the Force is different. They force each other to look at things with a different perspective, which is something which I wish Star Wars did more in live action. Let's push the boundary a bit. I loved it. I was so excited. I was when they finally kissed. Finally, man.
Yeah, if there was ever like an option to create a technology to fist bump a character through the screen, I would have like, hey, Cal, good
Yeah,
job.
We're all your wingman here. We're all nudging you. Just come on, man. And the same for you, Marion, as well. Just be honest with each other. And they
Yeah,
finally were.
he got his goth fatty.
He
Uh,
he absolutely did. And she got a adventurous, fearless hunk as well.
yeah. But yeah, it worked for me a lot. There was not a beat where I was like, oh, this doesn't work.
Mhm.
Um, I mean, yeah, I'll just echo what you said there. And I think it works really well when you get a certain power late in the game, or I think mid, or as soon as you meet her, actually, in Jedi Survivor, you get the little teleport ability from her. Um,
Oh yeah.
and that was another case where I'm like, oh, this is a current gen game because you would not be able to do that on a hard drive. Well, or maybe
Dude,
now you can because it's on Xbox One. So
that sequence where you have to go through the portals was insane.
yeah, and I'm gonna have a fan theory for a minute.
Okay.
I think they did more than Kiss. I think there's a Jedi baby. There's one more Jedi survivor.
I hope so. But then they've got Carter now as well at the end of the game. I'm like, do they want another kid on top of that? Because listen, I'm a father, and I always said, oh, I'd love to have a couple of kids, and I have one, and she's the love of my life. But now I'm like, damn, I don't know if I can have one's enough. So I wonder what Cal and Marion are thinking. If they're like, do you know what? Carter, she doesn't make her bed, she doesn't tidy her room in the mantis. I don't really think I can do that again. But I kind of with you there, dude. If it isn't in this game, I do think I don't want to say I think, but part of me is like, oh, I wonder if they're going to do that because Cal's already given up the order now in terms of attachment and all that. I wonder if they're going to go full hog on this. They're not
Yeah,
going to show it, but I wonder if they're going to imply it. Yeah,
yeah, they're not gonna do a first person like you're looking up at Marin.
VR.
No. Uh, that's a Star Wars Jedi VR. You're just
That's
looking up.
DLC.
Uh, that's the EA Play Season Pass. But no, I'd be fine either way. But I was just like, oh, fade to black. I know what's happening there.
Yeah.
But especially after you just saved her life.
And the way Bode looks at him when he walks off, he's like, "I'm going to go and record a story," and he kind of winks and nods. He's like, like, "Come on, Bode, man." And that, and that's the day. And with Bode, I'm like, man, I get that he's apprehensive about going to Tanalorr with a hidden path, but just moments like that, even in the last time you really speak to him pre his betrayal, he's kind of like, "Listen, I'm going to go and do this. You have a good night. You've earned it, brother." And I'm like, this guy's cool. This is a great dude.
Yeah,
And then he goes and does what he does, man. You get the high of the family being back together, drinking tea. They're all teasing each other. Marion and Cal were they at least kissed. Know how much further they went. Bode's being cool. Why did you have to do it, Bode? Why? Why? Why did you have to do it, man?
yeah. I echo that Kylo Ren meme of him screaming traitor. Uh,
Yes,
like,
yes.
dude.
Did you because when you're okay, we've spoken about the Bode betrayal and that and where it
Mhm.
comes in the game, but of course before that, and you have the whole Dagon stuff, and I'd love to know your thoughts on him as a character.
Sure. Yeah.
But Dagon was set up as the primary antagonist. I want to say 60% of the game, maybe 60% through the game, you kill him, he's dead.
Mhm.
But the game's not done there. When you kill Dagon, did you think that was game over?
No. I'm like, well,
No,
he's got like I can't remember. Have you killed all the like his minions yet? I can't remember.
no, you
Uh
haven't. He's the first baddie you kill,
yeah, okay. So
main baddie. Yeah.
yeah, like I didn't think it was game over, but I was just like, okay, where's the story going? And then like the hint is given that like, oh, you should go off and be with Mare. And I'm like, so what are you saying? You this is this is real traitor behavior right now. Um,
Oh,
but yeah, no, oh no, you defeat um Dagon and then jump right into Bode, I think, a few
yes,
hours
you
later.
defeat Dagon, and then Bo's like, "Oh look, I'm going to hang around here for a bit," which went straight over my head the first time.
Yeah,
Yeah, then you
because
then
he
you go back
steals
to
the
Jeddah.
lightsaber.
Exactly right. He steals a lightsaber. And then you go back to Jeddah, and Cordova says, I'll fix the compass. You guys go and have a great time, and of course, and then they do, and it's celebratory.
Mhm.
It's ecstatic. You're going to Tanner, or you're gonna be safe. And
But
I didn't. Oh man, I'd love to know. Yeah, what? So your thoughts on that? What did you think about Dagon as well as
uh,
an overall antagonist?
yeah, sure. I think Dagon was a pretty weak antagonist. I didn't really feel like, and maybe this is where my criticisms of having the companion book start to come in.
Mhm.
Um, it really felt like, okay, there's something I'm missing here. And we know that he's tied to the not the old Republic, the High Republic. He's been like in stasis for what, like 1,000 years or something like that.
200 years.
200 years, sorry.
Yeah, a long
Um,
time still.
I always get fuzzy on like High Republic timeline because it's so new. Because it's basically just in books and in the Acolyte. That's basically
Hmm.
all we have. This is the first time a game's really interacted with that lore. And I don't know anything about the High Republic. So I'm like, outside of Acolyte and this. So I'm like, okay. I need some blanks filled in on like why he's so um important to the story, why like it was just weird to me. I didn't get his motivations as a antagonist. He literally just wakes up and starts yapping, for lack of a better term, bleeds his crystal and says bye, and um, has the one guy, the rearrangeable guts,
Ah,
uh,
Ravis.
Ravis, uh, pick him up. He called the Ravis Uber, Ravis Space Uber, and it's just like, okay, that was the first point where I'm like, what is this game gonna be about? Like, if if I bodied Dagon in the first fight, like, what? Why is
What's
he
next?
even like the main guy? So I think that's where, I was talking about like recognizing Bode as the antagonist early. This is where my brain went into overdrive. I know I've said it
Hmm.
on other podcasts before, but uh Arrival and Annihilation, got the poster there. I'm like, um, those movies, my when something doesn't click for me, my brain goes into overdrive trying to fit the missing puzzle piece.
Hmm.
So any interactions with any characters, I was immediately on like high alert. I'm like, what's going on? Like, because Dagon definitely isn't the antagonist we think it is. Is it Z 5 or whatever her name is? Like, who is actually the real antagonist? Is it Ravis in the background, like some secret Sith or something? Because Ravis has been alive for 200, 300 years. He's like one of the you read his data little bio thing, and it says he's been alive for hundreds, if not thousands of years. Like his species can live very, very long. So I'm like,
Hmm.
okay, if he can live
Yeah.
very long, he might be the actual villain. Um, and then that turns out not to be true. And then, obviously we get the Bode reveal. And when Bode starts talking about, like, maybe you should be with Marin, maybe you could just settle down and not be a Jedi. It's like, what are we
Hmm.
doing here, Bode? Um, And there's like certain animations where after you talk to him, you could catch him around the overworld, like looking at things that he's not supposed to be looking at. And it's like, okay. So I put on my Sherlock Holmes hat. So overall, Dagon Gera just really didn't work for me because because one, the High Republic has never come into any part of Fallen Order or any other part of Cal's story. It didn't make sense to me. Um, like if it was maybe somebody who worked for Count Dooku, I would maybe understand, or you know, because like the first shot we get, and it's on the main menu, um, is of the Jedi Temple on Coruscant.
Hmm.
I was like, okay, the Jedi Temple has to be important somehow. So my brain was working overdrive, and I'm like, obviously Dagon isn't the villain. Something it just didn't work. There's no personal connection, and then the personal connection happens with Bode. So it's like, oh,
Hmm.
yeah, he didn't work for me. None of the High Republic stuff worked for me. Um, that just didn't work. I like the robot though.
So he's cool.
Yeah, I mean, it just
Yeah,
doesn't work.
in terms of the High Republic lore, the one thing I can say, whether it puts your mind at ease or not, is you don't need to, because I've read the books and most of the comics. There's quite a lot to engage with. I usually just read the book, so is that none of what happens in Survivor is you don't need to read the books to know anything about it. It's not. It doesn't play off of anything. It doesn't jump off of anything. If anything,
Hmm.
when Dagon goes into the Bacta tank, that is right at the beginning of the High Republic. So that would also explain why he's never been in any of the books. He's in the Bacta tank the whole time, which I quite like as well. But and the nods to the High Republic for someone who's read the books and that they're very cool, but they're not dependent on. Similarly to the Acolyte, you don't need to read the books to know anything about the era when you watch the Acolyte. There are mentions of things that happen in the books, which I'm always going to be grateful for because it's rewarding you for your time spent. But nothing in Survivor is hangs its hat on the fact that you need to know what happens. If anything, it's more of an introduction to the era. And it's kind of like, well, this is what happened a couple of hundred years ago. To me, it's more like, that's what happened. If you want to find out more, go and read these 12 books, go and buy these 20 comics. It's like, it's very much trying to merchandise off of it. But yeah, the whole thing did feel like a bit of a left field swing out of nowhere. And I do think it is a conscious effort to try and push the new era. They know they've got the High Republic. And, for better or worse, they did it. I like the character of Dagon. Dagon, I agree. I think they could have fleshed out, or I think they could have explained his motivations better,
Mhm.
or certainly spent more time explaining them. I don't need everything spelt out to me, but I do need to get a sense of what exactly he wants to do, other than go to Tanalorr, raise an army, and take over the galaxy, which seems like a bit of a stretch from where he was when he went in the tank. So I do think they could have spent a bit more time with him. I liked him as a antagonist in the fact that he was, doing really funky stuff with the Force. He was manipulating the Force with his emotions and changing the fight to be what he wanted it to be. So the bit where you're on the ceiling on the floor, it's crazy
And
and
he grows the
multiple.
arm.
I did like that. I thought that was very cool, even
Yeah.
though when I watched a cinematic of it today and they're locked with their sabers, and then suddenly the second hand comes out of nowhere. I did, and this is me again being a critic and being like, yeah, he didn't need to do that. He could have just cut him in half,
Yeah.
and he wouldn't, and he'd been like, he didn't even have to tell him that. But similarly to how they did in the Acolyte, when I actually won't spoil that, but yeah, I like the character. Visually very cool. I like his fighting style, but I do think that out of all the antagonists, he was the one that they could have done with a little bit more meat on the bone of Ravis. Ravis, I got enough of him. I think he was cool. He's a warrior. He has a code of honor. He has a warrior's code. He's living in a galaxy now where he doesn't think there's any honor. The
Mhm.
Empire's not honorable. He wants to be free of his servitude to Dagon, and he's only in servitude to him because Dagon beat him in a fight a couple hundred years ago. That's and because of that, he owes a debt of gratitude to Dagon. That's why I'm fine with that. I don't need to know any more about that. He doesn't want to take over the galaxy. He doesn't want to be a moustache twirling villain. He's just following Dagon's orders. And actually, if he gets a Tanalorr, he's even said, if we get there, I consider my oath fulfilled. I'm done. And it's Dagon who's like, no, you're not. So, I like Ravis. I think he had I like the fact that they gave him a code of honor. So he wasn't just a big mindless idiot trying to kill you. They could have had him as that and it would have been cool. But, and I also like the way he goes out as well. Give me my warrior's death. I'm
Mhm.
not going to help you, but I'm not going to stop you getting to where you need to go to. I quite liked that. I liked that we didn't recruit him as part of the gang because that would have felt like we're in a shark. And I think Respawn have got a handle on this kind of stuff. They know that what people will accept. And if suddenly Ravis is like, okay, I will work for you now, Cal, I will join you. I think people would have just thought, no, that wouldn't work. Whereas Ravis saying, haha, nope, I'm not going to join you, Jedi. But I tell you, Dagon's going here. I've done this, this, and this. But you're going to have to kill me now because that's what I want. kill or be killed. So I like that. So I like Ravis. I like Dagon. I like Bode as an antagonist as well. You could also say the same about him. Is Are his motivations strong enough? But he's a father, and he says that, I'm a father. I just want to keep my kids safe. And he says it a few times. Can you hold the Empire back? Can you keep my daughter safe if the Empire come knocking? He knows Cal can't. Does that then mean he was right to basically condemn everyone in the hidden path to death by saying, I don't want, you're not coming to Tanalor. You could stay and be refugees and fight the Empire. Me and my kid, we're having this whole planet to ourselves. No. So I can kind of understand his motivation to an extent. You want to do anything to keep your family safe, but at the expense of hundreds of thousands of people, maybe
Mhm.
that ain't a good move, Bode. So, there was nothing stopping Bode going to Tanalor with Cal and basically sitting down and saying, right, let's work this out. Let's make this foolproof. Let's work out a schedule where I'll go out or we'll go out and do this at this time. We'll get these people and we'll make sure. He could have done that, but he obviously he'd gone down a dark path. He'd lost himself and fine. But yeah, I think Dagon was the one that could have done with a little bit more topping on that pizza.
Yeah, I even feel like some kind of playable prologue where we play as Dagon, where that first scene where we're looking through Dagon's eyes and Cal's like confused. How am I here? What's going on with that? I think that could have been a nice intro to the game. Instead of, I know Cal can do the not psychogrammetry, um,
Psychometry.
psychometry stuff where he can see into people's minds and relive the memories. But like that just didn't work for me because
Mhm.
it's like, okay, you're not even connected to his head. Like, are you like the back to tank has those memories? What? Um, how does the back to tank have those memories? Anyways, but
The Force. That's why.
because well,
That's the reason.
because we need it to happen. That's the
Yeah.
reason. But yeah, I think a prologue of that could easily have fulfilled that same thing because you're kind of throughout the game going through learning his motivations and looking at it and you're like, but there's like an additional, I'm going to use a metaphor here.
Mhm.
Everyone knows who's read my reviews knows I love using a metaphor. It would be like, okay, you've got the bun of the burger, you've got the meat, you've got the lettuce, you've got the tomato. Oh, but wait, you forgot to buy, say, the cheese, or the top bun's missing. That's what Dagon's um that's what Dagon's motivations felt like. There was just that cheese or that bun missing from the final piece of the puzzle, as I said earlier, was just missing.
I can see that.
Um,
Yeah.
and you brought up something, or you made me think of something while you're talking about Dagon. Um, or rather, in terms of Star Wars lore kind of things, did it feel weird to you that we're mixing three different eras of Star Wars lore at the same time? Like there's prequel stuff that's going on, there's sequel stuff that's being pulled from, there's High Republic stuff that's being pulled from, and then there's um um the little robots from episode three, the droidicas.
Yes. I know what you mean. Yes and no. I do because again, as a fan of the franchise, I've seen that they've done this a few times in different media where they're like, well, because if you think about it, the Clone Wars would have ended, I think, about 9 years prior, maybe 10 years before. So it stands to reason that there probably would be a droid or two hanging about. It's not like it was 50 to 100 years later where you'd think they'd be gone. The idea of the Bedlam Raiders, who are the gang on Kobo, having an entire droid army is okay, fine. I guess, but they explain it because they've got that huge separatist ship they have to invade. That's why they're there. So they make sure to cover their tracks as to why the High Republic thing. You could look at it and think, well, Pyloon's Saloon, Grease's pub, Grease's Cantina, just happened to be built on top of High Republic's. Okay, right. I love the story, so I'll kind of gloss over the fact that that was one of those story moments that just had to happen. Um, but that brought in the High Republic, and I do think a lot of that was also just to introduce that era to a wider audience. And the sequel stuff, like you say, I think as well. I think they're just trying to tie in as much as they can do to make everything feel legit, to make everything feel like one um story. Like there's been uses of stuff from Fallen Order in other things, especially the Obi-Wan Kenobi show, which was great to see, and it legitimizes the game, even though it's part of the canon. It
Mhm.
just legitimizes it more. And if you haven't played the game and you watch Kenobi, you're not missing. Excuse me, you're not missing anything. But if you have played the game, it adds more to it. And I guess that's what they're going for as well. Like if you've read the High Republic books, you'll notice some of the things they say and be like, oh, I've it's the Leo DiCaprio meme,
Yeah,
pointing at the screen. I understood that reference, or maybe the Captain America one. But can it feel a little bit OTT in this game? Yes, it does. As a fan of the franchise, I love being able to fight battle droids and things like that. But then I compare it to the almost kind of stripped back nature of Fallen Order, where you don't have that. You're just fighting the Empire. And there is something to be said about that simplicity of the first game being, there's a certain charm to that. But if you just did that again for the second game, what's the point? So I get why they had to go bigger. Did they try too much? I think the argument could be made for that. Again, as somebody who loves the game so much, I'll eat all of it up. But the argument can be made that was there too much going on? Were there too many antagonists? Was there enough time to give everyone space to develop? Did we need to have all of these disparate factions going on from different eras? I think your mileage will depend on that. For me, I got over it. I didn't mind it, but I'm not blind to the fact that I think they really were ambitious with this game, which does make me question, not in a negative way, but does make me question what do we do next? Where the hell do we go now?
Mhm.
If we've had two fights with Vader, well, we haven't. Well, I suppose we've had one. I know so the first fight in Fallen Order wasn't a fight with Cal. There wasn't even a health bar. So we fought Vader twice. We've lost two of our masters. We fought the Empire. We fought the Bedlam Raiders and the High Republic Jedi. What is next? You know what I mean? That's kind of where I'm thinking is what is the motivation? Because we know there's another game coming. It's in development. Do you think the next game will be the last game in
I
this
think
series?
I think it will. Um, but I do wonder if that will be the next time we see Cal,
Hmm.
because I know I was one of the people who bought into the rumors about Obi-Wan Kenobi and maybe Cal appearing in that show. I still think that's going to happen. I think
Yeah.
it's going to happen in Mandalorian and Grogu, um, where it's like a much, much older Cal. Um, like, I don't know. He's doing something. I don't know. Maybe like Grogu's just like, hey, making baby Yoda noises, and then like Cal's off drinking in the background. I don't know. I need to see Cal in live action. I just need to see it. You don't get Cameron Monaghan and then not use him in live action. But I do think the third game is the last game. And it was funny, before you asked that question about if it's the last game, you were talking about losing two of his masters. I have a terrible thought.
Hmm.
What if Cal loses Marin in the third game?
I think in the third game, and I love Greasy Money, baby. I love Grease. Grease is one of my favorite characters in Star Wars, just because he's just a curmudgeonly old man with a heart of gold. He's that classic archetype character. And
Mhm.
Danny Roebuck, who I've interviewed, and he's a great guy. He uh he brings so much to that character. But I think Greasy Money's time is up in the next game.
Yeah.
I think Grease will be the one to bite it. And that is why, and I think because of that, we will then be given the opportunity to, like, that's where the mechanic of flying the mantis will come in. To get from A to B, we have to fly it. Um, Merrin, though, this is the $1 million question: is what do they do? How far do they want to go? Because Cal has lost everything, everything. So do we want to have it where he loses his own life at the end of the story? Because if he does, it'll be a glorious sacrifice. There's no way Cal's going out like a punk. But do we have that glorious sacrifice? Do Cal and Merrin have the Force babies, like we say? Do they just wait it out on Tanalorr? Because at the minute, that's one hell of a story out. The Empire don't know about it. You could just have Cal sit on that planet for 10 years, train up the next generation of Jedi, or just train Calta, come back out to face the galaxy, and then he was like, wow, the Empire are gone. Now, the whole time I was on there, I didn't realize, and he's coming into a new galaxy. Um, yeah, I do believe Cal's story is going to end in the next game. I think they always said it's going to be a trilogy. I do think Cal's he won't be making it out, but I don't know about Merrin. It depends on the story. What, and that's what I said. Will the Empire find out about Tanalorr or the Hidden Path again? Is Cal going to say, right, I need to take Vader out? I don't know. All I wanted to do is retain that personal feeling, its uniqueness, and let the characters that respawn and developed be the ones to bring this baby home. Because I don't need cameos. I'm not interested unless they work like I know we're in spoilers now. So with how Boba Fett turned up. That's great. Little cool little moment where Boba Fett turns up. Vader's presence felt necessary in these games, but I don't need to see Cal just happening to fall upon Obi-Wan in the desert. I don't need to see him accidentally find Yoda. The one thing I would say about the sequels, and I do like those films. In Rise of Skywalker, it is what it is, but fine. What I wish they'd done is I wish they'd had the courage to end it with their own characters. The Last Jedi ends up with Luke's gone, Snoke is gone, Kylo and Rey are all that's left. I wish Episode 9 had just been Kylo versus Rey in this big emotional film full of character depth and nuance. Instead, they reverted back to we've got to bring Palpatine back and we've got to have this and this. But they didn't have the trust in their own characters. I need Respawn to have trust in their characters that it isn't Ahsoka coming in or Ezra Bridger and Kanan. They're not the ones who come in and save the day. No, it's Cal, it's Merrin, it's Grease, and Kata in this case. Well, they're the ones who bring this home, whether they win or not. That's all I care about. Is Merrin getting out though? I don't know. I don't know. It depends what happens with Carter. Do they want to leave Carter an orphan? Basically is the question here because I can see a situation where Merrin and Cal, sorry, have a glory. It's a bit like the end of Bonnie and Clyde or something, or where they. I just hope Cal and Merrin get to go out on their own. Maybe they'll go out on a blaze of glory. Maybe it'll be like Bonnie and Clyde or Thelma and Louise, where they go out together. But then, like we said, Carter, they're not going to orphan off Carter. In short, mate, I don't know. I think Cal's not. I think Merrin might be the only survivor of this story. Whether people like that or not, I don't know. It it depends whether they want to have Cal around post Return of the Jedi and another Jedi surviving and stuff like that. I don't want that to happen because I want Cal's story to be wrapped up in the games. Because I
Mhm.
hear what you're saying. 'Cause so many people want to see Cameron Monaghan in live act, and so do I. But I mentioned recently that I want them to finish the game. I want Jedi 3 to come out. I think it'll be called Jedi Legacy. I think that's what it's going to be called.
Mhm.
So you've got Fallen Order, Survivor, Legacy. That's just what I think. I want that to come out, tell Cal's story, and then you can go back and put him in something else. Like you can have him show up in Kenobi, and we know where his story goes, but it doesn't impede on the game, what the story's telling. Because Cameron Monaghan is fiercely protective of his character. Hearing interviews with him, he is fiercely protective. So he will only do what he thinks. He'll only appear if it's right for the character. And I respect that as well. He wants the character to go out or to be portrayed in a way that he feels does justice to what he's done. So we'll see. But I think Grease is going, which pains me to say. I'm going to be a blubbering wreck if Grease dies, but I think Cal's going to go. Mirren, I'm not sure about. You posed the question. Who's
Yes.
making it out of the game three?
So I agree. Grease isn't making it. He
Oh,
he already lost an arm in between games. Um, which is is explained in the Battle Scars book.
Yeah.
Um, I think the people who came for him in the first game end up killing him.
Oh, the Brood, Haxion Brood.
Yeah, the Haxian Brood, because they're still around in the sequel trilogy. So that means they're a force to be reckoned with. So I don't think you can just easily get away from them. I think Kata gets away scot-free. I think we do have a prologue where we see her grown up.
Hmm.
Um, I think Marin makes it um by the skin of her teeth. Uh, like little not well, not literally. I don't think you can show like somebody's skin falling off in a game, but um well, I mean you got Mortal Kombat, but
Yeah, they did
um
it with Palpatine in The Rise of Skywalker.
yeah. So I think she makes it if only to serve Ahsoka, like that what happens there. Because I feel like she I mean, they're very clear about Marin's status as like the last Night Sister. So how is it that there are three Night Sisters uh in Cetos? Somebody had to have done something. Um um Cal, I don't think he makes it. I don't think he makes it. I don't think anyone uh I I think Cal's the only one who dies. Um because I think there will be a switch that flips inside of him with the antagonist of the third game. And
Hmm.
that'll be what I don't think we get a third Vader fight. I don't think that happens. Um,
Yeah.
or if we do, it'll be so gloriously epic that those questions about like how can Cal defeat Vader or something
Yeah.
like that will just be amplified to a
Yeah.
thousand degrees
It would
because
have to be epic just to, yeah, warrant its inclusion. Look, Vader needs to. Vader is a Jedi hunter and he's the daddy, but they have the Inquisitors, of course. But you've had Vader in both of these games. Obviously, the fear is if you put him in a third game, it almost becomes kind of like, oh, again. So it'd have to be one hell of a fight.
and I do think the Death Star at least makes an appearance in the third game. I think Tanalorr gets blown up
Can you imagine with people on it?
with people on it,
You beast.
with maybe I could see either Grease or Cal being on it. Well, um, and maybe that's the moment where we fly away, like you've been talking about all podcast. We have to fly away, leave Grease behind, or something like that.
Don't say that. I can't handle that. I can't handle that.
Or do this worse. We have to leave Marin behind. Mm.
The Cal. See, I don't think Cal could do that.
No, I don't think he could. Like,
But to save Carter, would he?
yeah.
Oh
Um,
damn.
and but yeah, I think somebody gets the business end of a star, the Death Star laser.
Something big's gonna happen. Something big has to happen. Or do they go the other way and make it a smaller game like Fallen Order, where you just have one kind of primary antagonist throughout, and you yourself are almost your own worst enemy. You're trying to fight the dark side. You're trying to do what's right to guide Kata through the darkness, like Seer said. Do they pivot and give you a smaller story?
I
Well, I
think
say
it
smaller. It's going to be an epic story, but in terms of scope,
I think it goes even bigger. Um,
yeah.
I think you're going to be able to fly your own ship. Maybe even the man. Oh no. Maybe even the Mantis is the one that gets turbo lasered,
Oh, I always have my model up there to remember it by.
and the customization extends now to your ship, like it was in the
Hmm.
first game.
Yeah.
Because now you've got to switch out parts because some parts of your ship break down mid-flight. You know, you use the hyperdrive too much. Yeah, maybe your home base now is going to be the Mantis or whatever ship you have, because in the at the beginning of the game, Tanalorr gets blown up.
or attacked at least.
or
Yeah.
attacked. Like some found out like you can't, you have to get off Tantalore. Um,
Yeah, I don't know how they get something will happen, I think, in the first third of the game, which is pretty big. I mean, it's not that's not a hot take. I think something massive will happen, but it's what is it? Is it going to be one of our characters kicking the bucket? I think it will be. I'm just excited. Again, I'm even more anxious now because these two games I hold in high esteem. I think they're fantastic examples of how to do Star Wars. It's got all of the hallmarks of Star Wars, but it's pushing the envelope a bit more compared to what we've seen in live action. You know, like everything Cal's going through, we're not seeing that in live action at the minute. You know, the family dynamic, we're not seeing that in live action. The exploration and the distinctness of what they're showing, we're not seeing that in live action at the minute. It's kind of a bit, how do we make people happy? Well, let's show them what they know.
mhm.
You know, these games do that, but they also stand on their own 2 feet. Now with the third game, man, am I they? I just hope they nail it. That's my only real fear is I just hope that they nail that the ending or the story of that game. Because if they do, for me, best one of the best Star Wars trilogies of all time, best Star Wars story overall of all time. If they can get the landing,
Yeah, I just kind of came up with the perfect analogy, the perfect video
okay.
game analogy for what I think Jedi 3, the scope of it will be. And it's ambitious. So just
Hmm.
strap in. Uh, I think it'll be as big in scope as Starfield.
Big then.
Yeah, like big, like how you have Constellation, that like you'll have a home base kind of like that. Maybe that's Tanalorr or something like that. Um, and then you have to like upgrade your ship. You have to upgrade like your weapons, or in this case your lightsaber. Um, and maybe you get some customization for Kata, and maybe she has like a trainer's lightsaber or something like that. I could definitely
Mm.
see like a point in the game where you play as Kata. Um,
Like The Last of Us when you play as Ellie in the first one.
oh yeah, maybe Cal dies and then you have to play as Kata for the rest of the
I've seen
game.
that, yeah. Or at least he's taken out of the game for some reason.
Yeah.
Like with Seer, you know, Cal's beaten by Bode. Well, let's play as Seer for it. I don't, man, I don't know where it's going to go,
I
but I
think
like that.
I think either way we're gonna be a blubbering mess when it comes out in what, probably 3 or 4 years from now.
Yeah, I'd say 2027, I reckon. Because this game was impacted by COVID. Obviously,
Mhm.
Respawn had to, as everything was, Respawn had to completely rework their way of working, and actually Stig has now taken that into his um new studio, the way that they work. So and this game was rushed out. They said that themselves. It actually took less development time than Fallen Order, which is understandable in it to some extent, that they've got the character models, they've got a lot of stuff. It's just obviously building new stuff. Do they learn? Hopefully, they learn from the rushed release of Survivor. But with Stig going, I think it's Jason DeHaras is now the game director for Jedi 3, and he was the lead narrative designer for Fallen Order and Survivor. So the guy replacing Stig has been there since day one. He's been in every meeting. He knows Stig's story and he knows his brain. So I'm not too worried about the story feeling too like like a completely big departure from the first two. A lot of the people who worked on the first two are still going to be working on this one, but how ambitious do they want to go? That's it's how ambitious do they want to go? I think they'll do it. I think they'll stick the landing, but who knows if we'll agree with everything they do along the way. I hope that they trust their characters. They trust Cal and Merrin as well to be the ones to finish the game. It's not, oh, and then hundreds of X-Wings came in and saved you because that's we need to set up Rogue One or something. No, no, no. I love connectivity. I love the connectivity, but let them finish their story. And I'm excited. I'm sitting there now every day waiting for any bit of news to come out about the next game. But I also know that I'm going to be waiting a long time.
Yeah, and I want and you ha had me thinking about the time jump. You asked about the time jump earlier.
Hmm.
I think we will get a small time jump, maybe like 2 years, like you said. I don't think we're gonna get another 5 year
Yeah.
time jump because if we get 5 years, Kata's gonna be way too old, and then it's gonna be like, mm. I think, sorry, Kata's story is gonna be the reverse of Cal's story. Whereas he, uh, in Fallen Order, they talk about his story being from a very young age. He was like cutting himself off from the Force and then had to grow up without the Force.
Hmm.
I think it'll be the inverse for Kata, where she had to learn the Force, assuming she does. I mean, probably she probably will, but being with
Hmm.
mostly Force users other than Grease.
Yeah. Will
Um,
she learn the Jedi way, or will she learn the Night Sister way, or a bit of both?
I think she'll learn a bit of both. I think
Yeah.
like the Last Jedi way, where it's like, yeah, yes, both light and good side. So, or
I
not
dig it.
light and good side, light and dark side, where it's
Mhm.
like you can embrace your emotions, but also know when to keep them in check. Because if you don't, you end up like this person I fought in Jedi Fallen Order, or this person I fought in Jedi Survivor. Obviously, Cal's not going to say, "Hey, you remember Fallen Order?" No, but uh, and kind of going to look at him like, "What are you talking about? Um, what do you mean Fallen Order? What?" But
It's on
but
sale, quick.
for $30, rush to PSN.
It
Actually, it's probably cheaper than that now. Um,
should be.
um, but either way, I can't wait till 2027. Um, I would be fine uh if the next Jedi game doesn't come out until the new generation of consoles. I'd be fine.
Yeah, I can see
Um,
it happening.
and we're already hearing about the PS6. Uh, heard about it yesterday. Or at least I assume that report was legit. Um,
Mhm.
it's way too early to know, I think, but I'd be fine if they wait out the entire rest of the thing and maybe we get more Star Wars games that are like it. Like I would love to play Eclipse someday. Quantic Dream, if you're listening, please.
Yeah,
Um, because that like little alien dude that's banging their drum looks so cool. Like I want to hear about him. Like
and that's set in the High Republic as well. That game,
yeah,
or towards the end of, I think. So
but yeah, like I'd love to play that game. If they resurrect the Amy Henning game, where it's kind of like I forget the basis of that game, but I'd love to play more Star Wars games. It feels kind of, I don't want to say barren, but also yes, barren. So, like before this, we got, I think the last game before this was what? Squadrons or not Outlaws.
Squadrons, yeah, it was, yeah, because
Yeah.
EA had the exclusivity deal, didn't they? So it's only EA could make the games. And look, I think controversy aside, with bad releases and loot boxes and things like that, I think EA's record is actually pretty good. Battlefront 2015 was great when it came out.
Mhm.
2017 with Battlefront 2, fantastically fun game. Great story as well. Star Wars Squadrons, I'm with you, but it's a very niche game. And
Mhm.
from people I know who like flight sim and space combat games, they said it's really good. It delivers on what it says it will do in terms of like that immersive experience. And apparently it's great in VR. The game wasn't necessarily for me, but those who like that have said it's good. Fallen Order was great and Survivors. I mean, the games they've given us have actually been very good if you look past the post and pre-release issues that they've had.
Yeah.
Whereas we've only had one now from another studio, and that's Ubisoft, which Outlaws is doing okay, but it isn't doing. the same numbers that Battlefront has done or the Jedi games.
It
So
yeah,
there's
it
something to
was
be said about that.
Outlaws was my counter pick for on my fantasy critic draft this year.
Yeah, it's the kind of game that I say get it if it when it gets in sale on sale, get it then. You know, it's definitely worth getting it on a discounted price, or if you can
Mhm.
get it as part of some kind of Game Pass or whatever, do that.
No, I'm glad you mentioned that. Ubisoft. I know you're not listening, but if you are, bring Ubisoft Plus to PS Plus. You already have the
Hmm.
Ubisoft Classic thing going on. Just and you've got Ubisoft Plus as part of I think Game Pass or like or something like that. You've got some where you can subscribe to Ubisoft Plus. I would love to play Assassin's Creed Shadows, but I'm not paying $80.
Yeah, no.
I'm or $100 or whatever it is. I would
Yep.
rather do the seven or however much it is a month for like 1 month
Yep.
to play all your games. So bring that to PlayStation, please. I,
Yeah. No,
I
I
would love.
wouldn't advocate anyone spending that money because that's a lot of money to anyone. So maybe the discussion should be why are games so much money now? Why and yeah, you could argue that they're next gen and more work goes into it, but on the flip side, not to sound harsh, but there aren't many games that are released AAA that actually are released in a complete fourth state. No, no, not other than maybe Baldur's Gate, I think. Other than that, there aren't many games that drop on day one and are ready to go anymore. And I'm paying £80 or $100 for a game. I want it ready on day one because I come from a generation where I'd buy a game and it was ready to play. That was it. I don't like the idea that people get studios get a pass because well we can patch it after a month or two or whatever. Well then okay, sell the base game for £40. I'll pay £40 for a game which I know might not be complete, and then maybe I'll pay £20 down the line for when it's whatever for the patch. I don't know, but to pay 80 quid up top and it not work, and to have what you experience, which is with contemplating not even finishing after halfway or leaving it, that's not value for money,
Mhm.
and that's what I worry about. So, if when the third game comes out, that's another thing. Is the value for money there? I everything's Fallen Order and Survivor have told me I'm going to say yes, there will be, but it comes down to the story, dude. If they don't nail the story, then you know there's pressure on. That's all. That's what I was saying. There is a pressure on them now to get this right.
Yeah, I mean, first one was A New Hope. This one's Empire.
Yep,
Bring it home with Return of the Jedi, I believe
that's
it's called.
exactly it. That
Like,
is exactly it.
but make it better than Return of the Jedi. Because like Return of the Jedi is goofy in some parts, but um,
Don't say that to my Star Wars Sessions co-host. It's his favorite Star Wars film because it's
mm-mm.
fun, because of the goofiness, because of the wackiness.
Yeah, but if they can deliver on like a Starfield-esque kind of thing, but make it better than Starfield, um,
Ah,
don't procedurally generate the planets so that when I
no,
go to Earth, it's not just like the skyscrapers and barren uh moon dust. Uh, but yeah, I think I'd love a Jedi 3 with like you can fly anywhere. Or not fly anywhere, but you're given a galaxy
Mhm.
to
Time
just
will tell.
explore. But yeah, um, and we've got some Star Wars shows coming up. I know Skeleton Crew comes out what this month or next month.
4th of December, or for you guys over there in the States, 3rd of December. For us in the UK, the 4th.
It's the day before my birthday.
There you go. But early birthday present. You get 2 episodes of Skeleton Crew, which I think the trailers look like a lot of fun.
And let me preface this. Um, I love goofy Star Wars, so I don't care that there's a bunch of kids. Um, I just don't like goofy Star Wars when it's adults. Um,
I get it. Yeah, it's like It Chapter 1 and It Chapter 2 if you like horror. You know,
exactly. Yeah.
the
Um,
first part is great.
looking forward to that. Maybe I'll have you on for a Skeleton Crew when that finishes up.
Yeah,
And
always up to talk Star Wars.
yeah, so but with that said, okay, there we go. There's my notes. Um, For those listening or watching at home, I would love to hear what you think of Jedi Survivor. You can talk to me on Blue Sky, Facebook, Instagram, Threads, under my username Austin B Media. Uh, I'll have a Discord channel set up for this podcast. Um, and then I also have a Patreon community chat thingy that I'm still trying to figure out the merits of. But speaking of Patreon, if you'd like early access to the next episode and much more, um, head over to patreon.com/AustinBMedia. For just $3 a month, you get 48-hour early access to reviews, podcasts, interviews, articles, as well as the Patreon only channels of my Discord. And then if you go to the top of the tier, the 10-month tier, you'll unlock uncut podcast episodes, bonus discussions, and exclusive retrospectives on films like Alien, Hellboy, Transformers, and more. But hey, I know subscribing isn't everybody's thing, so I've made it available to purchase posts and collections on my Patreon shop. And then, hey, if you enjoyed the episode, please consider subscribing on your favorite podcast app or to my YouTube channel. Uh, Leave a rating on your favorite podcast app. I know Pocket Cast just enabled that um, ability just a few updates ago. And then Spotify, of course, and Apple Podcasts. And then review it. Yeah, review it on can. But Matt, I want to thank you for joining me today. Where can people follow you uh, and get your thoughts on movies, games, and more?
No, no, thank you for the opportunity. Always happy to talk Star Wars. If you want to find me, you can go to whatiwatchtonight.co.uk and just search for What I Watched Tonight across all of the socials. I'm on Letterboxd. You can hear me every Wednesday on Star Wars Sessions talking about Star Wars. Every Thursday on the Bloody Awesome Movie Podcast as well, where I review a film with my buddy John, and regularly on Spook City, a horror movie podcast, which is all about horror movies. That one's a little bit more sporadic than the other two, but listen, I'm just happy to talk film. I love talking things other than Star Wars. Horror movies are what I was brought up on, but I'm happy to talk film with anyone at any time. But yeah, thank you for the opportunity to come on.
Yeah, I'll make sure to ping you anytime I have the Star Wars or you mentioned horror. Maybe we'll talk about Saw later next
Ooh.
year. But I've been your host, Austin Belzer, and until next time.